LoveLore Library. Chapter 408. Young Master Xiahou is so courageous. I'm really in awe. Let's see which one of them will subdue the other. The crowd was so excited by the gossip that they wanted to immediately knock on the bamboo board and call everyone in the city to share the news. After a while, thunder rumbled in the sky and it started to rain. The crowd quickly retracted their mocking and curious gazes. Io, why is it suddenly raining again? There's too much rain this year. Let's run. The crowd scattered to hide from the rain, leaving only Xiao Yuni at the end of the road. He stood alone in the rain, the fine drizzle wetting his hair. It was the same color as his pupils, making it seem darker. He stood there quietly, like a cold statue, not making any sound. An oil paper umbrella covered his head. Your Highness. The person holding the umbrella was a girl in her flowering period. Her eyes were watery and her eyebrows were playful. Looking closely, she looked very similar to Ningxu. Even her style of dressing and makeup was the same as Ningxu's. She was beautiful but did not lose her heroic spirit. The only difference was that under her gentle appearance, there was a sharp murderous aura. If Ningxu saw her here, she would definitely have mixed feelings. Looking at her, Xiao Yuni frowned and said coldly, Fei Luan, why are you here? Didn't I order you not to show yourself unless I announce it? What's wrong? You don't care about my orders anymore, do you? Fei Luan immediately knelt down on one knee and bowed in fear. Fei Luan doesn't dare. Fei Luan only saw that it was raining and couldn't bear to see your highness get drenched, so I boldly showed myself to shield you. It's Fei Luan who deserves to die for violating the taboo. Your highness, please punish me. Even if I got drenched, what does it have to do with you? I remember telling you to remember your status and not overstep your boundaries. I took you in because I didn't want to disappoint Mother, but it doesn't mean that I won't kill you. Do you remember? The young girl's eyes were filled with longing and regret. Your Highness is Fei Luan's master. As long as your Highness wants Fei Luan's life, Fei Luan will not hesitate. Fei Luan knows that in your Highness' eyes, I am only Lady Ning's shadow. But even so, your Highness, please take care of yourself for the sake of this shadow. On your Highness' birthday night, you drank so much that you vomited blood. Fei Luan doesn't want to see your Highness hurt like that again. Xiao Yuni grabbed her neck. That's enough. I don't need you to remind me. The umbrella in his hand fell to the ground with a thud. Oh. Fei Luan was forced to raise her head, and her slender neck made a creaking sound. Her snow-white skin was red because she couldn't breathe, and her trembling eyelashes were covered with rainwater. Xiao Yuni stared at the tear falling from the corner of her eye. He seemed to have seen a certain life from thousands of years ago, when he had strangled Ningxu, kneeling in front of him and crying silently. This illusion of unknown origin caused his heart to sway and his chest to feel stifled and painful. He couldn't help but loosen his grip. Fei Luan covered her neck that was almost broken and coughed violently. Xiao Yuni shook his head hard, but he still couldn't understand where that illusion came from. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes and turned around hoarsely. The hem of his brocade robe embroidered with golden clouds fluttered in the rain. If you're not dead, let's go. Fei Luan stared at his cold back and answered with a hoarse voice. She picked up the umbrella that had fallen on the ground and turned back to look at the Duke of Nanping's residence behind her. She then looked away and followed him. For tens of thousands of years, there were no clear skies or flowers in the underworld. It was monotonous and dull, like a dead ash. The only blooming red spider lily was actually not a living thing. It was formed from souls that had angered the heavenly Tao and were crushed into powder by the hand of the heavenly Tao. They had flowers but no leaves. The scarlet and beautiful color was all formed from the last mouthful of heart blood of those souls. After that, they had to wait by the river of forgetfulness for thousands of years, suffering the loneliest and most hopeless punishment in the world. When the scarlet color faded, the souls would completely disappear and they would finally be free. Therefore, it tasted terrible. Ning Shu had just entered the underworld for 10 years. After eating the 999th red spider lily and gloriously saying that she wanted them to die early and reincarnate, her face was numb. Chapter 409. Ning Shu sighed and sat on a large rock beside the river of forgetfulness. She muttered to Dendrobius, "I don't want to say this, but the scenery in the underworld is really bad. Other than a few dark palaces, there are only red spider lilies. It's too boring." Dendrobius squatted beside her and poked her, "This is also your underworld." He died around the same time as Ning Shu. Because of his merit, he was appointed by King Yanluo to stay in the underworld. When his internship was over, he would officially become an official ghost servant. Because they were fated to go to hell together, and he had a good temper, he often accompanied Ning Shu to stroll around the underworld. Ning Shu. Okay, I forgot that I died a long time ago. So other than black and red, are there any other colors here? Dendrobius said, "Yes, look at that white bone ghost over there. His body is pale, just like my claw. But his body is richer. The yellow moving things on his body look like corpse worms. They're so cute." Ning Shu had her reservations about his unusual beauty. Other than black, red, pale and this cute yellow color, are there any other places in the underworld that are more pleasing to the eye? It's best if there's something lively. Looking at these boring things all day long, I feel like my soul is going to scatter. Let me think about it. Ah! I remember, there is. It's in the small garden behind King Chujiang's palace. It's the only living thing in the underworld, and it's also the only immortal herb. I heard that King Chujiang brought it into the underworld when he was still a deity. It has its own immortal aura and can even glow. It's very beautiful. The scenery in the garden was also created by King Chujiang according to the heavenly palace. It's beautiful and there's no other place in the underworld that's more beautiful and elegant than that. However, you better not go. I heard that King Chujiang has a bad temper. He doesn't even smile in front of King Yanluo. No one in the underworld dares to provoke him. Where are you going? Come back quickly. It'll be terrible if he catches you. If you really get caught by him, please don't say that I instigated it. Great Aunt, I beg you. Dendrobium's shouts were still echoing behind her. Grand Aunt Ning Shu had already drifted to the surroundings of King Chujiang's palace. She avoided the patrolling ghost envoys, then turned into a small gray stone and rolled herself into the heavenly palace of the underworld that was rumored to have immortal herbs growing there. It had to be said that His Highness King Chujiang, who was said to be the #1 beauty in the netherworld, had a sense of beauty that could crush all ghosts. There were pavilions and towers in the garden, and clear spring water flowed down from them. Rootless lotuses in the lotus pond swayed along with the ripples of the water, and there seemed to be the faint sound of music by their ears. It was clearly a ghostly realm where the sun could not be seen, but it made people feel as if they were in a fairyland. There were a few snow-white furballs bouncing around in the grass beside the lotus pond. Ning Shu reached out her hand to touch them, and she felt an illusion. She continued to walk towards the depths of the garden. Suddenly, she saw a rainbow-colored brilliance shooting out from a pot of flowers and plants. When she saw it, Ning Shu was captivated. She thought that this should be the pot of immortal herb that was famous in the ghostly realm. The spiritual energy that assailed her nose, as well as the aura of life, made any ghost that had stayed in the underworld for a long time feel an unbearable itch. I want it. She was endlessly greedy. She reached out her hand to touch it, but she did not notice that there was a downy bird that was resting on top of the immortal herb. That downy bird that woke up extended its beak and pecked her. Yeah, where did this bird's temper come from? It looks quite cute. King Chujiang's place really lives up to its reputation. I didn't expect that other than the immortal herb, he also raised an immortal bird. He really knows how to enjoy life. Rotten. The bird stared at her, and she stared at the bird. What are you looking at? I'm praising you for being cute. I haven't settled the score with you for pecking me just now. Why don't you come with me? Ha ha ha, don't worry. I, Ning Shu, am the best at taking care of people. If you follow me, I'll definitely let you eat and drink well. Let's go. That bird did not expect her to be so daring. It was caught by her for a moment. Carefully holding it in the palm of her hand, Ning Shu was extremely fond of it. She kept stroking its soft little head. Is it comfortable? Is it comfortable? So obedient. Little fellow, you look like this. Are you male or female? Let me examine you! Exclamation point. The downy bird that was originally enjoying itself in Ning Shu's palm suddenly struggled with all its might. Ning Shu hurriedly said, "Are you shy?" All right, all right, all right. I won't look. I'm just teasing you. I didn't expect you to really be a spiritual bird. You can understand everything I say. Moreover, I don't understand you birds. He. The downy bird cast a sidelong glance at her, but it seemed to be reluctant to part with her gentle touch. It was difficult not to argue with her. Ning Shu stroked its soft and slippery feathers for a while. She was addicted to touching it. To be honest, you're lonely here alone. Your master is busy all day and has no time to accompany you. Why don't you recognize me as your new master? If you don't want to, hurry up and say something. You don't want to say anything. Then I'll take it that you agree. Ha ha ha, come, little darling, give your new master a kiss. Seeing Ning Shu's lips getting closer and closer, the downy bird's little body stiffened and immediately struggled with all its might. Ning Shu saw that it was funny. When its little head moved to the left, she chased to the left. When its little head moved to the right, she chased to the right. She forced it to the brink of collapse. Ning Shu only saw a burst of light in front of her eyes. The downy bird in her hand quickly expanded and then turned into a tall and majestic figure in a purple gold-black robe. He broke free from her hands and retreated. The figure's face was immersed in a black fog. Only a pair of eyes stared coldly at her from behind the black fog. Ning Shu, how dare you offend me? You deserve to die. Chapter 410. The consequence of offending King Chujiang and tarnishing his innocence was to be hung upside down at the entrance of Fengdu for a month and banned from getting close to King Chujiang's hall for 100 years. Ning Shu had no face to face the hundreds and thousands of ghosts that surrounded her to admire her heroic appearance. Even though ghosts didn't feel pain, they still needed some face, didn't they? Luckily, her psychological quality was excellent, so she got used to it quickly. Headless Ghost carefully held his head and squeezed out from the crowd of ghosts to ask curiously, "I heard you kissed the legendary number 1 beauty of Yudu. Is that true? Is that true? How did you do it? How powerful?" Ning Shu said lazily, "So, it's nothing worth mentioning." Painted Skin Ghost grabbed a brush and dabbed it on Headless Ghost's bloody neck to touch up her makeup. "Then did you see how that highness looked like? How did she look? I've stayed in the netherworld for almost 30 years and still haven't seen the true face of that highness. If I still can't see her, I won't have any interest in reincarnating." Ning Shu made things up. "She looks all right. 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth. However, every part of her body is more well-rounded than ordinary gods and ghosts. Long eyelashes like fans, skin like congealed jade and smooth to the touch. She seems cold yet not cold, but she has eyes full of emotions. She's magnificent and elegant. That's about it. All the ghosts drooled and swarmed over. What else? What else? Be more specific. Ning Shu's eyes that were like black mercury rolled around, and she laughed. Hee hee, you want to know? How about this, painted skin sister, I'll tell you. Please help me draw it. Those who want to buy, come and queue up. The price is fair, 3 underworld coins for 1 painting. When King Chujiang accompanied Emperor Fengdu to patrol the netherworld, they saw such a scene at the entrance of Fengdu. A snake-tailed queue stretched out half the street, and people were all rushing to buy the freshly made painting of the number 1 beauty of Yudu. The Emperor of Fengdu cast a spell to conjure a picture and immediately laughed, although I don't dare to compliment her painting skills. If you look carefully, her facial features are indeed somewhat similar to yours. It's just that her feminine aura is slightly heavier. Could it be that she really saw your true appearance? King Chujiang, who was immersed in the black mist, didn't make a sound, but the murderous black mist around him visibly thickened. The great emperor admired the beauty for a while. He then pointed at the little fat bird on the beauty's shoulder and said, "There is also a fluffy bird next to it. It is so chubby and cute." The black fog was so thick that it could freeze a ghost to death. On the other side of the room, Ning Shu didn't know that the second party had already arrived and was watching. Chapter 411. Who would have thought that after being mistaken for a bird and almost kissed by mistake, the person who was so angry that he didn't allow her to step within 5 li of King Chujiang's palace for 100 years would actually take the initiative to steal her beauty on the street one day? Ning Shu woke up from her sleep, but there was still a smile on her lips. "Older sister, what's wrong?" Ji Er's clear and curious voice came from beside her ear. Ning Shu returned to her senses. Nothing, what's wrong? Since I came in to see you, you've been smiling, and your smile is very strange, just like... Ji tilted his head and deliberated for a long time before finding the right words, just like you ate something especially delicious, and your face is also red. Older sister, are you sick? My face is also red like this when I catch a cold. Older sister, don't move, Ji will call a doctor for you right now. Ji strode with his short legs and was about to run away worriedly. Ning Shu hurriedly pulled his soft little body back, her cheeks slightly hot. She cleared her throat and stood up. "It's really nothing, I just dreamed of some interesting things from my childhood." Ji blinked his eyes. "What interesting things?" "It's about when you were 1 year old. Father prepared a large pile of ornaments for you, and even specially placed his favorite inkstone in front of you. In the end, you poured urine all over it. That's right, that time, the last person you caught was Prince Zhuang's family's little princess, because she was the most beautiful." Older sister, you're too bad. We've already made a pinky promise, you can't talk about going out. If you're like this, I don't want to give you snow bean paste anymore. Ji was teased until his stomach was panting with anger. Ning Shu blinked and acted pitiful. All right, it's older sister's fault. Older sister will apologize to you. I'm so hungry, can little Ji bear to see older sister starve to death? Ji pouted and angrily looked at her for a long time, but in the end, he gave in. All right, I'll give it to you. But remember, if you say this again, I'll definitely break off relations with you. All right, older sister will listen to Ji After coaxing Ji away, Ning Shu bathed and changed her clothes. Her lustrous white toes gently paddled in the water as she stepped into the bathtub. Ever since she left the Nanping Palace, she hadn't had the time to wash off the dust on her body. She slept for more than 4 hours before she gathered some strength and looked out of the window. The crescent moon was like a string, casting down a clear light, just like his magnificence. Back then, she had spoken nonsense behind his back and ruined his reputation. She had thought that he would be furious and throw her into the seawater prison for 180 years as punishment. She was frightened out of her wits and racked her brains to think of a way to beg for forgiveness. She didn't expect that he would just look at her for a long time without saying a word and then leave. Since then, the matter of her and King Chujiang's avacania began to spread widely in the underworld. When the ghosts saw her, they all respected her, causing her to be confused. Ning Shu narcissistically thought, could it be that it was really as she had made up? Back then, he was shocked at first sight and fell in love with her at second sight. Forsythia brought over the freshly cooked snow soft bean paste. Ning Shu picked up a piece and took a bite. Her cheeks inexplicably turned red again, and her painted eyes became watery. His lips were slightly colder than normal people's, but they were soft to the touch, just like the snow soft bean paste in front of her that was as white as snow, as soft as clouds, and sweeter than honey. She tasted it, and half of her body went limp. She couldn't stop dreaming. Wait, why did she think of that kiss again? Ning Shu finished the food in her hands in 2 or 3 bites. She ordered Forsythia to open the window and let the night breeze take away the unusual heat on her face. Chapter 4:12. Forsythia pushed open the door and came in. "Miss, dinner is ready. Do you want to eat it now or when?" Ning Shu's white fingertips casually pointed at the translucent screen. The translucent screen faintly outlined her beautiful figure. "You can put it there first. I'll use it after I take a shower." "Okay." Forsythia put the food on the small table. When she tidied up her dress, she accidentally knocked over a wooden box inside. She quickly bent down to pick it up, but when she saw the shape of the wooden box, her expression suddenly changed. "Miss, you rushed for a day and a night just to get this thing from Master Hui Xi's old residence?" Looking at Forsythia's nervous expression, Ning Shu rubbed the tip of her nose guiltily. "You found out." "Don't worry, I'm not going to do anything with it. It's just that Master's old residence has been unguarded for a long time. It's not safe to leave this thing there. I thought it would be better to keep it with me." Forsythia's expression was unprecedentedly serious. "Miss, do you think I'm only 5 years old like second young master? This is a life substitution goo. When Master passed away, you said that this thing was too evil. If you take this goo, all the injuries, poison, and illness will be transferred to your body, exchanging a life for a life. It's against the laws of heaven. Master struggled before he died, but he still didn't use it. It's better to let it go back to silence and never appear in the world again. But now you deliberately took it out. What do you want to do?" Ning Shu smiled. "Are you afraid that I'll use it to exchange my life with Xiao Qing?" "Don't worry, I'm not that stupid. Xiao Qing's life is very tough. He can walk around the gates of hell and come back. He won't die so easily. Even if one day he really becomes terminally ill and can't be saved, I don't have to exchange my life with him personally. There are too many criminals in this prison who have committed unpardonable heinous crimes to count. I don't care which criminal is going to be executed the next day, I will buy his life and compensate his family well. I am sure he will agree. Why would I put myself in danger for no good reason? I'm not that stupid." "Really?" Forsythia looked at her suspiciously. "Good Forsythia, well I swear to you on the greatest pleasure of my life. If I'm lying, then I'll never be able to eat any delicacies in the future, nor earn a single copper coin." She raised her hand and swore, her eyes wide open with sincerity. Forsythia gradually dispelled her doubts and put down the wooden box. Ning Shu thought of something and asked, by the way, for Scythia, how has Tan Xiaoqing been these days? Before she left the city, she had specifically asked for Scythia to keep an eye on Tan Xiaoqing's condition. Forsythia frowned and sighed, sigh. He's not doing so well, Ning Shu frowned. 10 miles away, after the sudden death of the envoy, Shi City returned to its usual bustle in less than 2 days. There were even many people who were itching to come here to pay their respects to the crime scene. It was as crowded as a marketplace and the limelight was unparalleled. In an inconspicuous brothel at the corner of Xuanfang Terrace, Tan Siwei sat silently in the corner with unkempt hair and a dirty face. He poured cup after cup of strong liquor down his throat like a piece of wood that could move silently. The drinkers around him pushed away the girls in their arms and looked at each other. They stood up and surrounded him with smiles. One of them with slanted eyes smiled and said, "Ioyo, let me see who this is." So it's the high and mighty second young master of the Prime Minister's residence, the youngest fourth-ranked official, young Master Tan of the Supreme Court. Why are you in such a good mood to come to a brothel and drink wine with us, a group of ordinary people? This commoner is really flattered, ha ha ha. Chapter 413. Another person hurriedly stopped him. Hey! Brotherly, you're in the wrong here. Aren't you mocking young Master Tan on purpose? Who in the 9 provinces doesn't know that Prime Minister Tan knowingly broke the law, harbored a criminal, had a wicked daughter with a criminal, and is also a cruel criminal? His moral integrity is extremely repulsive, and he himself is too embarrassed to resign and become a monk. How can he still be considered a prime minister now? I heard that His Majesty was in court today, and there was a large pile of memorials to impeach the Tan family. His Majesty flew into a rage. The Tan family is either dead or seriously ill. It's already very fortunate that they can still take out 3 to 5 copper coins to drink wine with prostitutes. You're still mocking young Master Tan, aren't you, purposely rubbing salt on his wound? Come, Minister Tan, please don't bicker with this scoundrel. This commoner toasts you with this pot of wine to thank Prime Minister Tan and Minister Tan for the hard work you've done for the people. This person raised his wine cup to toast Tan Siwei, but unexpectedly, his hand shook, and the entire cup of wine spilled on Tan Siwei's head. He pretended to be frightened and said, "Oh. This commoner's hand is extremely clumsy. How could I offend Minister Tan? Let this commoner quickly wipe it for you." This person picked up a piece of cloth and hurriedly wiped Tan Siwei for a while. In the end, the more he wiped, the dirtier it got. He suddenly realized, I was wondering why the more I wiped, the dirtier it got, and the more I wiped, the more smelly it got. Minister Tan, you won't punish this commoner because of this, right? The person next to him said, "How could I? Minister Tan is a famous lord under the heavens." He, Minister Tan, don't you think so? From the beginning to the end, Tan Siwei was like a piece of wood that did not have any feelings. He sat there quietly, allowing the countless mockery and ridicule to surround him. He did not say a word, and even his eyes could not move. He was like a walking corpse. The more he was like this, the louder the ridicule around him became. Minister Tan, why are you just sitting there and not saying anything? You look like a homeless stray dog by the roadside. Lin Yang, look at Minister Tan. Isn't he delicate and pitiful and lovable? Why don't you sisters take Tan Xiaoqing as a gigolo? In any case, Tan Xiaoqing isn't far from being removed from his position, ha ha ha. People's deep-rooted bad habits were undoubtedly exposed at this moment. When one person gave the idea, the rest of the motley crew immediately responded. As they spoke, they laughed and pulled Tan Siwei up, straight into the arms of the girls. In the midst of the shoving, a hand reached over and pushed Tan Siwei heavily onto the floor. Tan Siwei lay on the dirty floor as if he was dead. He looked up at the dazzling glass lamp above his head and the crowd that surrounded him like ghosts, pointing at him and laughing like they wanted to eat him alive. His ears were filled with noise. After a long time, he painfully covered his ears, turned sideways, and curled himself into a ball. Transparent tears flowed out of the corners of his eyes. A drunken middle-aged man staggered over. Tisk, tsk, tsk. You don't look like a court official at all. You're simply a disgrace to our great Yu dynasty. Since your father has left home and doesn't care about you anymore, let me reluctantly teach you a lesson. As the man spoke, he grinned, picked up the hem of his clothes, and reached in with an empty wine cup. Not long after, amidst the crazed screams and applause of the crowd, the man carried a cup full of urine and walked in front of Tan Siwei. Minister Tan, this commoner will treat you to this cup of wine. You must kindly accept it, ha ha ha. He picked up the cup and was about to pour it over Tan Siwei's head. Suddenly, a leg flew over and kicked him in the chest, causing him to fall to the ground in a sorry state. The cup of wine in his hand splashed right on his face, causing his face to overflow with fragrance. The man was burning with anger. He picked up a chair and climbed up from the ground. Son of a bitch. Which son of a bitch dares to touch your master Zhao? I'll let you leave here alive today. The man nimbly retracted his leg and rubbed it in pain. His lips curled into a bright smile. Don't you know who I am? I'm the legendary Lone Star, the reincarnation of the celestial fox. If you speak to me, bad luck will linger for a month. If you continue to stay in the same room with me, you will most likely die without a burial place. You are Ning Shu. Master Zhao, what advice do you have for me? Chapter 4:14. There was probably no story more terrifying than the two words, Ning Shu, in the capital. Once they heard her name, most of the people who had been aggressively surrounding her immediately quieted down. This was because her name had spread far and wide. When most of the children in the capital cried and refused to listen, as long as their parents said, "If you continue to cause trouble, I'll have Ning Shu take you away," most of the naughty children would immediately shrink their heads and obey. In addition, she had solved 3 cases in a row. Wherever she went, people would die. Everyone respected and feared her. As expected, the ruffian who called himself Uncle Zhao shrank his neck back. He looked around and saw the dozens of pairs of eyes looking at him. No matter how scared he was, he had to put on a fearless expression. He glared and said, "So what if you're Ning Shu? I don't care who you are. In Shi City, your Uncle Zhao is the law. If you know what's good for you, immediately kowtow to your father and admit your mistake. Then your father will spare your life." Ning Shu blinked her eyes and said with admiration, "Uncle Zhao is so powerful. You actually dare to call yourself the law in the capital. This little girl admires you. But I'm afraid I can't kowtow to you. I, Ning Shu, only worship 3 kinds of people. The first is the elders in my family. The second is the emperor. The third is to worship the dead in the grave. Could it be that Uncle Zhao wants to be the last kind? You little girl, you dare to curse me? I'll beat you to death." Uncle Zhao raised the chair in his hand and angrily threw it at Ning Shu. But before he could get close, a stone had already hit his knee, causing him to fiercely fall flat on his face. The surrounding people immediately burst out in laughter. He lost all his face and was so angry that he went crazy. He shouted loudly as he climbed up and pulled out a knife from his chest to stab at Ning Shu. Zigui appeared and kicked him to the ground. He then forcefully stepped on his back, causing him to cry out like a pig waiting to be slaughtered. Zigui exerted more force and said coldly, "A lowly scoundrel like you actually wants to harm my family's young miss. You don't know the difference between life and death. The severe pain made him sober up halfway. Master Zhao lay on the ground like a dead tortoise that couldn't turn over. Only then did he realize that he seemed to have kicked an iron plate that he shouldn't have kicked. He immediately begged for mercy in fear. I just ate horse urine soup. That's why I didn't recognize Mount Tai and offended Miss Ning. Please be magnanimous and forgive me. Please, miss. If everyone can be forgiven after they make a mistake by hypocritically apologizing like you, then what's the use of the law? Master Zhao, don't you think so? Ning Shu bent down, raised her eyebrows and smiled. If I'm not mistaken, you wanted to invite Tan Xiaoqing for a drink, right? Although my daughter's talent and learning are shallow, she has seen my father's etiquette when inviting guests to a banquet and drinking wine. Every time my father wanted to propose a toast, he would drink first to show his sincerity. How could he let the guest drink first? How about this, Master Zhao, if you drink this cup of wine today, then I'll forget about this matter. Master Zhao knew very well what this wine referred to. His expression changed a few times, and he cursed loudly. How can you treat me like this? You, Duke Ning, have a large family and business. Are you going to use your power to bully others like this? His righteous words amused Ning Shu. Ever since I was young, my father has taught me to be kind to others and to never use my power to bully others. Otherwise, I'll suffer a backlash. However, people are always curious. I really want to know what it's like to bully others. Whether it's sweet or not, I'll give it a try on Master Zhao today. Zigui, pry open his mouth. If he doesn't lick his wine clean today and kowtow to Tan Xiaoqing to apologize, then stuff the dagger he was about to use to commit murder into his stomach and eat it. Chapter 4:15. I can't. I can't. If I eat this knife, I'll die. I'll definitely die. I'll lick it, I'll lick it. I'll lick it all down. Master Zhao finally knew fear. He quickly kowtowed to Tan Siwei like an old dog. Then, he endured the stench and lay on the ground, licking the cup of wine that Ning Shu had kicked to the ground. He then wiped the bit of wine that splashed on his face into his mouth. In the end, he couldn't help but vomit. Zigui glared at him in disgust and magnanimously told him to scram. Master Zhao had no face left. He covered his face and ran away in terror. After witnessing Ning Shu's power with their own eyes, no one dared to cause trouble again. They all lowered their heads and stayed far away, not daring to provoke Ning Shu again. Ning Shu looked around indifferently. The bystanders scattered and didn't dare to watch the show. Walking to the drunk Tan Siwei's side, Ning Shu helped him up and said gently, Tan Siwei, wake up. Let me help you back. Tan Siwei. Tan Siwei opened his red eyes and looked at her in a daze for a while. He broke free from her hand and got up from the ground. He walked back to the table where he had been sitting and grabbed the empty wine pot. Go back for what? Go back where? Apart from a broken mother, where else can I return to in the capital? Tan Siwei's family can be considered to be ruined. Your heart isn't with me, so why are you pretending to care about me? Are you pitying me? I'm not a beggar. Even though I've fallen to this state, I don't care for anyone's pity. Go away. I still want to drink. I haven't had enough. Someone, bring me another pot of wine. Don't worry, my house hasn't been raided. I still have money. The tortoise glanced at them and slowly brought over a new pot of wine. Tan Siwei grabbed the wine pot and poured it down his throat. He choked and coughed violently, but he continued to pour it down. Ning Shu didn't want to see him humiliate himself like this. She frowned and forcefully snatched the wine from him. Tan Siwei, do you know what you're doing? I know you're heartbroken, and it's hard for you to accept it. But look at you now. Do you still look like you used to? What would Bella think if she were to see you in heaven? How heartbroken would eldest young master be in the underworld? Have you thought about it? Tan Siwei smiled numbly with tears in his eyes. Now I am in the human world and they are in the netherworld. We are separated by yin and yang. How can I know what they are thinking? They all left, and I was left alone. In the future, when I tried to run away from home with a kite on my back, there would be no one holding a whip and yelling at me to indulge in wild fantasies. There would also be no one who would remind me to change my bandages on time after I broke my leg and sigh at me, "Second brother, you mustn't be so reckless in the future." There would also be no one who would sneak into my room at night crying and asking me, "Second brother, are you in extreme pain? Can't you share half of the pain with me? Let's go, let's all go." From now on, no one will care about me anymore. I'm completely free. How happy. Why don't I drink? I want to get drunk to my heart's content as a celebration. Looking at his extremely sad expression, Ning Shu's heart was stabbed. She couldn't help but think of her family and loved ones leaving her one by one. She was the only one left in the world. She also struggled bitterly like this, wishing she could accompany them in death. She pursed her lips, grabbed the wine jug and poured herself a cup. She raised her head and drank it in one gulp. You want to drink? I'll drink with you. You drink yours. I'll drink on behalf of Bella and eldest young master. How much do you want to drink? I'll drink double tonight. She poured the empty wine cup to Tan Siwei and poured 2 more cups in succession. She endured the spiciness of the wine and drank it all down her throat. Tan Siwei watched her in a daze. He watched as she poured herself cup after cup of wine. She looked as if she was going to drink the entire pot of bitter wine for him. Ning Shu, you don't have to do this. He reached out to stop her. Ning Shu smiled faintly. In my heart, although you and I haven't known each other for long, I've already regarded second young master as a close friend. Moreover, when I parted with Miss Bella for the last time, she didn't have any other worries. The only thing she was worried about was you, so she specifically asked me to take care of you. How can I go back on my words? Tan Xiaoqing, I won't persuade you tonight. Why do you have to persuade me? Tan Siwei's watery eyes swayed. He looked deeply at her and couldn't help but lean over and hug her tightly. It was as if he was hugging his last straw. Ning Shu, do you know? In the sea of life, I'm the only one. This world is too cold. Ning Shu paused for a moment. She raised her hand and gently patted his back. She said softly, I know. As for Bella, she loved to cry in the beginning. There weren't any girls of the same age in the residence. I thought that all the girls in the world were like that. Every time she cried, she would secretly hide and cry by herself, not letting anyone know. She didn't like me, I knew it the first time we met. Even if she tried to hide it, her eyes couldn't deceive me. But her eyes were filled with disgust and sadness at the same time. She was afraid of the people in the residence and the new environment. So after thinking about it, I still walked over and held her hand. It took me a long time for her to slowly accept me. On my 9th birthday, Bella personally made a pouch for me. On it was embroidered a rabbit with 1 ear and 3 legs. One of its eyes was big and the other was small. It looked very funny, but I was really happy because I finally had a younger sister. That night, everyone was laughing. Even my father patted my head and lifted me up into the sky. That night, I really thought that we were the most harmonious family in the capital. Tan Siwei sank into his memories. He smiled and leaned against the tree beside him. Closing his eyes, his smile faded. I didn't expect that it was all a facade that they deliberately created. In the end, they all knew the inside story. I was the only one who happily stayed in the peaceful place that they all pretended to be, like a naive fool. Now that they've finished their act and left one after the other, there's only this mess left. There's also me who was fooled into a fool by them. Tell me, how can I continue to live like this? Chapter 4:17. Ning Shu looked at the water stains on his face and slowly said, "How can you be a fool? You are their most important light." Miss Bella came to the capital with a vicious aura and walked into the Prime Minister's residence. She treated everyone as an enemy and was full of fear and vigilance towards everything around her. If she didn't meet you and eldest young master, she might have forever been a hedgehog with only hatred in her heart, curling up her body and dealing with the outside world with thorns all over her body. She might have only been able to secretly hide in a corner and cry, unable to learn how to smile. However, you took the initiative to walk over and hold her hand. No matter how cold she was, you didn't give up on her or ignore her. You're the most important person in her life who didn't turn bad because of hatred. Instead, you're the one who's most important to her. As for eldest young master, in the end, he didn't hesitate to commit murder himself. Not only did he want to protect Miss Bella, he also wanted to protect you who fell into the trap. As you said, all these years, he was the one who gave you advice from the side. In his heart, he really dotes on you like a younger brother. As for your father, he went through so many things. He painfully lost his only daughter and had to bring her back to the Prime Minister's residence in fear, raising her in the name of his niece. However, Miss Bella has always been hostile towards him. No one can understand the bitterness he felt. You took the initiative to care for Bella and dispel her vicious aura. This is the greatest comfort to your father, so he was so happy on your birthday. Admittedly, they have been acting all these years, but it is precisely because they care about you and are afraid that you will find out, that they put in so much effort to maintain the peace and harmony between the family. Tan Siwei raised his eyes and hesitantly said, "Is that really the case? You are just comforting me." Ning Shu nodded affirmatively. "I promise you that if I am lying, you can break off your relationship with me. As for your father's resignation, he didn't abandon you. It's just that he was overwhelmed by grief and regret. He fell into a deep self-abandonment, unable to face the world, and even more unable to face you. He is unable to face Bella, eldest young master, and Shui Hongyi's memorial tablets. If he doesn't leave, he won't be able to get through this." "Is that so?" Tan Siwei's lips trembled. Ning Shu said firmly, "Yes." Tan Siwei raised his head and looked at the clear and bright moon in the transparent blue screen. Unknowingly, something gloomy seemed to slowly dissipate. He let out a long sigh and finally showed his usual gentle and calm smile. "I hope it is as you said." A moment later, he turned around and said, "By the way, there's something I haven't had the chance to tell you. I think it might be something very important to you." "What happened?" "That day, I said that Heir Xiaohou was injured by my personal servant. Actually, that's not the case. The truth of that day was that I had seen through Bella's secret, but I was afraid that you would find out, so I secretly investigated and found the straw hut where Shui Hongyi had once lived. It was also the straw hut that my father often went to mourn alone. There, I met a black-clothed person with unknown identity. She knew everything about Bella and used it to threaten me. She wanted me to help her deal with you, otherwise, she would expose Bella and make her die without a burial place. At that time, I didn't agree, but coincidentally, you just happened to come out from there. Thus, a series of events happened. After learning the unexpected secret, Ning Shu's expression immediately became serious. Did Xiaoqing notice the black-clothed person's gender and characteristics? Tan Siwei nodded. Such a person suddenly appeared. At that time, I was very vigilant, so I paid special attention. It was a woman. Judging from her voice and the way she spoke, she was around 30 years old or older. Although she deliberately wore a black mask to hide her identity, her words and actions couldn't hide her body shape. For example, her threatening and persuasive words, her back was very straight when she walked, and her chin was naturally raised when she spoke. All of these showed that her identity was very unusual. Especially one detail: when she walked, her hands would be clasped in front of her abdomen. Every step she took was measured with a ruler. Compared to ordinary madams and misses, she was several times more restrained. I suspect that she is very likely from the palace. Why do you miss him? He did not receive a letter from Yuhong. The night is boundless, it should be like a dream of the living soul. The night wind blew, and the lights were flickering. Her heart was also in a daze. Walking out of Shi City, Ningshu boarded the carriage and was ready to leave. She did not expect to see a familiar figure standing under a crepe myrtle flower tree. The tipsy night wind brushed the branches of the flowers, silently teasing his shoulders and scattering petals on the ground. Ningshu saw him and her eyes lit up. She lifted her skirt and ran over. Why are you here? Xiahou Qing raised his head and looked in her direction. His thin lips opened slightly. I heard that the little bodyguard in my mansion made a name for himself in Shi City tonight. How can I not come to pay my respects and broaden my knowledge? He was so observant and alert that nothing could be hidden from him. Ningshu was slightly surprised. How do you know everything? She did not know why, but Xiahou Qing did not seem to be in a good mood tonight. Why, you don't want me to know? Ningshu explained. No, what I mean is that you have not recovered from your serious injuries. This kind of trivial matter is not worthy of your attention. You should be recuperating in your mansion. The wind is so strong at night. What are you doing out here? But Xiahou Qing frowned slightly and corrected her. None of the matters related to you are insignificant. You wanted to use this method to move me, to make me feel guilty, and to make me unable to refuse you. After being exposed, Xiahou Qing's expression turned sluggish. He picked up his pace and walked forward, coldly mocking. Yes, I did it on purpose. What, do you think I'm scheming, sinister, and despicable? Then you should stay away from me. Ningshu grabbed the back of his hand and forcefully shook her head. She loudly said, I won't. I'll tell you, I, Ningshu, have a twisted personality, and I like people like you. The more sinister, the better. I'm also not a good person, so you're a good match for me. Xiahou Qing's chest trembled violently. His body tensed up as he suppressed his emotions. He restrained his voice and said, I'll only give you one chance to go back on your word. You have to think it through. If you go back on your word in the future, I won't give you another chance. Ningshu shook her head, her voice unprecedentedly firm. I used to hesitate, but that day when I was trapped in the underground palace, I thought it through. There are some things that I shouldn't waver. Otherwise, not only will I not be able to benefit from it, I'll be worried and unable to accomplish anything. If I can't grasp what's already at hand, how can I grasp those who are desperately chasing after me? So there's no need to think about it. Instead, you should think about it. My Ning family's current situation isn't very good. If you get involved with me, you might be in a difficult situation. Before she could finish speaking, her hand was suddenly firmly grasped. A strong force pulled her into his embrace. Her nose was filled with the refreshing and elegant scent of his body. It smelled very good. Xiahou Qing tightly held her in his embrace, as if he wanted to melt her into his life, melt her into his flesh and blood. That day in the underground palace, she hugged him to keep him warm and gave him air to save his life. He had actually vaguely heard what she said. He was a half-dead person and shouldn't have disturbed her. But in the end, he couldn't control himself. He had never been selfish for himself in his life, but this time, he wanted to be selfish for once. Chapter 420. It was indeed the most lively place in the capital city at night. A large number of colorful streamers illuminated the place as if it was daytime, but it was more colorful than daytime, dazzling and blurring. In the evening breeze, the fragrance of crepe myrtle flowers was like a jar of 18-year-old flower wine that was knocked over. With a slight smell, one would be drunk in this charming and gentle scene. The shadow of the trees was also slightly tipsy. It swayed slowly and sprinkled a rain of flowers, falling on the two people's bodies, hair, and tight arms. The immortals who had lived in the heavenly palace for a long time had just seen the 7 emotions and 6 desires of mortals. They were like being poisoned and never looked back. It was so strong that they seemed to want to take revenge for thousands of years of loneliness. His chest was hot and his voice became hoarse, but he still tried to restrain himself. From now on, you can only put me in your eyes. In addition to your family, your heart can only be tied to me. Otherwise, I will kill you. Ning Shu, I ask you for the last time, have you really thought it through? Ning Shu hugged his back, chuckled, and comforted him as if coaxing a little boy who lacked a sense of security. Yes, I have. I really have. Are you an old man? How many times do you need me to say it clearly? Also, don't scare me with words. Do you think I will be scared? You are too naive. Under the black brocade with cloud patterns, Xiahou Qing's long eyelashes moved. He almost cherished the back of Ning Shu's head. If I can, I really hope that I am an old man in his 70s. This means that we have spent a lifetime together and lived together until our hair turned white. 2 shallow dimples appeared on Ning Shu's cheeks, and she said softly and firmly, "Don't worry, we will. We will definitely be able to detoxify you, and we will definitely be able to walk together until the day you are old." Oh my God, I don't want to look, I don't want to look. Shi Yan, who was not far behind, saw this and his eyeballs almost fell out of their sockets. He didn't want to look, so he quickly opened his eyes and stretched out his 5 fingers to cover Huema's face. Huema was watching with relish. Suddenly, he was interrupted and began to quarrel with him. Hey, why are you covering my face? Let go. Shi Yan had a weird look on his face and said with righteous indignation, how could Shi Ziyi be like this with Lady Ning? Like that, is simply immoral. Unbearable to look at. Not suitable for children. He blurted out 7 or 8 incongruous idioms in one go. It was obvious that he was stunned by the scene in front of him. Huiyamo crossed his arms in front of his chest and looked at him as if he was looking at a country bumpkin. What do you mean? They just hugged each other. Don't make a fuss. I saw them kissing this afternoon. Shizi held Lady Ning's chin and lowered his head. Their lips touched. After kissing him, he even said to Lady Ning. Huiyamo bent his 2 thumbs and touched each other. He described vividly and excitedly. Shi Yan looked as if he was struck by lightning. He grabbed his hair in disbelief. What? I am as pure as ice and as pure as jade, untainted by a single speck of dust, the noble prince of the Chu family. Ah! How could this be? How could he not be clean? Oh, I don't accept it. Ning Shu, let go of my Shizi. As soon as he called out, his mute acupoint was hit by someone. Zigui held her sword with both hands and raised her eyebrows. She walked out from behind them in disgust. Shut up, you are so noisy. As soon as Shi Yan saw her, his first reaction was to shrink his neck. The second reaction was to quickly raise his head and stick out his chest. He used a questioning sound to protest why she treated him like this. Zigui said coldly, you are a big man. You are so unreasonable all day long. You might as well be a woman. After saying that, she thought for a while and changed her mind. forget it. If you are a woman, I am afraid that you will not be able to get married for the rest of your life. You can only go to the temple to be a nun. Being a nun will only disturb the peace of Buddhism. It is better not to commit sins. Shi Yan was so angry that his eyes turned white. He almost fainted. After a while, he remembered that his hands were not restrained, so he unsealed his acupoint. He smiled angrily and approached Zigui. He looked down at her and said, "Ha! You dare to doubt that I am not a man. Have you forgotten who slept with you that night?" These shocking words instantly caused everyone present to be flabbergasted, and their jaws almost dropped to the ground. Zigui's snow-white face turned from white to red and from red to black. She waved her right hand and pulled out her sword and waved it at Shi Yan. "Shut up, you want to die." Seeing this, Shi Yan immediately ran away. He covered his head and ran away. "I forgot that I promised you that I would not say anything about that night. I am sorry. But you forced me to do this. Put down your sword. My mother told me not to hit a woman. Don't treat me as a woman. Let's fight to the death. Are you not a woman? Your body is soft, and your hair is fragrant." I will shut up, I will shut up. That sword is so sharp. Don't cut it." Among the chaos, Hui Mo complained miserably, "Shi Yan, we clearly promised that beautiful women are tigers. We brothers will not marry and we will eat and play until we are old. Why did you break your promise halfway? You liar, I hate you." Chapter 421. On the way back to the mansion, Shi Yan, who was beaten black and blue, waved his whip and drove the carriage miserably. Huema, whose heart was hurt too much, got the right to rest. He sat in the carriage and accompanied Ning Shu to eat and drink. He peeled a grape and threw it into his mouth comfortably. "Isn't the most honorable woman in the world the Empress? Is it really the imperial concubine Jiang, who failed to compete with the Empress for the Crown Prince 22 years ago?" Ning Shu held her cheeks with her hands, pursed her lips, and shook her head. "According to this logic, it is very likely that it is her. But there are still many things that don't make sense. Everyone knows that imperial concubine Jiang abandoned the cold palace 22 years ago after she failed to compete for the crown prince. That place is heavily guarded. How can it be so easy to get out? Moreover, she and Chao Ho have a blood feud. Chao Ho is ruthless and takes pleasure in torturing her every day. How can he let her go easily? Moreover, the direction of this sentence is too obvious. As long as you know a little about the past, your first reaction will be to associate it with imperial concubine Jiang. That person has worked hard for many years to gather and train confidants everywhere. How can she reveal her identity so easily? It seems too deliberate. Xiao Qing's face was as smooth as water, but one thing should be right. She is definitely a person in the palace. Maybe she is a concubine in the imperial harem, or she may be someone who hides deeper and we can't think of it. I also think so. From Yuseo's accident to the fall of imperial concubine Qi, and the old affairs of the Shui family, if she is not a person in the palace, there is no way for her to know all the secrets in it. And there is no way for her to reach so far and stir up so much trouble. And many of the clues we have at present point to the imperial harem. But we still need to think carefully about which one of the 3,000 palaces in the imperial harem she is. Ning Shu stretched out her fingers and wrote one by one on the small table. She listed all the suspects in the imperial harem in order and then screened them. But there were more than 10,000 people in the palace. There were hidden dragons and crouching tigers. None of them were easy to deal with. The person who hid behind the curtain and played with people's hearts in the palm of his hand, who exactly were you? On a small square table, the surface was dry and wet, wet and dry again. Ning Shu had written down all the suspicious names and eliminated them one by one. The names became fewer and fewer until there were only a few left. No longer hearing the sound of Ning Shu writing, Xiahou Qing sipped a cup of tea and said as if he could read her mind, "You already have a suspect in mind, don't you?" Ning Shu raised her head, her eyes glimmering with amber light. "You also have a guess, don't you?" Xiahou Qing's lips curled up slightly. The two of them didn't say a word, but it was as if they had exchanged a few words. Only they knew about this, and no one else could detect it. Hearing this, Huema was confused. The grape in his hand was no longer sweet. He spat out the grape skin angrily and muttered, "My two masters, who are you talking about? Can you also take care of us, the ordinary people with mediocre minds?" Ning Shu patted his shoulder to comfort him. "Don't worry. You'll understand as soon as you hear it. The emperor is getting older in recent years. If he takes action at this sensitive time, people can't help but think of that." "You mean to seize?" Huema almost blurted out. He was afraid that the wall had ears, so he lowered his voice and said weakly, "Seize the throne." Ning Shu was amused by his cautious demeanor. Today, in the imperial harem, although there are many imperial concubines, their positions can be considered respectable. There are not many who have given birth to imperial children and have the power to compete for that position. In the past, Consort Wan was a strong opponent, but she died under the influence of many forces. Consort Qi came from a noble family and gave birth to the fourth prince, but later on, he also went crazy. The third prince is waiting to be beheaded. His mother, Consort Wan, is not a very capable person. The seventh prince Xiao Yunsen is unrestrained and unrestrained, but he has the temperament of Prince Ku. His mother's family, concubine Zhou, is low-key and introverted. She eats vegetarian food and chants to Buddha all year round. The last one is the eighth prince Xiao Yunjin, who has just turned 15. He is the youngest and usually doesn't attract much attention. His mother, Wei Shi, also doesn't have a high position. What's interesting is that his mother's family happens to be in charge of the treasury of the Ministry of War. Hearing this, Huema's eyes widened. His brain turned a few times before he suddenly realized. "Oh, you mean the knife that Shui Ran used to kill Wen Huinyang?" Ning Shu nodded approvingly. "Wen Huinyang's death allowed us to find two pieces of evidence, the token of the seventh prince's residence and the knife of the Ministry of War's new style. This hint is really thought-provoking." After she finished speaking, she looked at Xiahou Qing. "What about you? Do you suspect anyone else besides her?" "There is one more." "Who?" "Princess Royal, Xiao Mingxue." Chapter 422. Upon hearing this name, Ning Shu frowned in shock. Her knowledge of this eldest princess was limited to the previous emperor's eighth princess, Jin Xing's most beloved younger sister. After Jin Xing ascended the throne, he immediately conferred her the title of Protector Princess. The princess residence's treatment was even higher than that of a legitimate princess, causing a bunch of old pedants from the Ministry of Rights to be unhappy. However, this did not affect Xiao Mingxue at all. She sat on the eldest princess's seat as steadily as Mount Tai, and even Empress Chao had to be respectful to her. Her life could be considered smooth sailing, and she was even betrothed to the most elegant and talented Tanhua in the imperial examinations, attracting the envy of countless unmarried daughters. If one had to talk about the biggest setback, it would be the death of a son, leaving only a daughter who was treated like a treasure and raised in the palm of his hand. However, not only did this not affect the prince consort's feelings for her, he even pitied her even more. This deeply in love couple was the role model for all the aristocratic families in the capital. It was not an exaggeration to say that such a person was a winner in life. Ning Shu really could not understand why she would be related to this series of cases. Why would I think of her? She had once heard her master mention that there was a deeper meaning behind Jin Xing conferring her the title of Protector Princess. It was because during the palace coup 25 years ago, Xiao Mingxue had contributed greatly to His Majesty's success in seizing the throne. This kind of person had already climbed to the top of her position and obtained extreme respect and glory. Why would she plan these things? Could it be that she wanted to be the empress? After snatching the position of the empress, she would pass the throne to her husband or that delicate little princess. Ning Shu did not know whether to laugh or cry. This was too absurd. However, a thought quickly rushed into her mind. She said in shock, "You're saying that she did this for her younger brother, Prince Ku?" This was too ridiculous, but after thinking about it carefully, it did not seem to be that ridiculous. Eldest Princess Xiao Mingxue was famous in the capital for treating her younger brother, who was born from the same mother. When Xiao Minglan was just born, his mother, Madame Sun, passed away. When Xiao Mingxue was 12 years old, she took on the responsibility of raising her younger brother. He could be said to have been brought up by Xiao Mingxue. After Xiao Mingxue and Prince Consort Han got married, Xiao Minglan stayed in the princess residence until he was 16 years old. He then left the princess residence to establish his own family. It was not entirely impossible for such an elder sister who treated her younger brother like her own son to do such a thing in a moment of paranoia. Xiao Qing moved his finger and ordered Hui Mo to take out an old file that had been prepared in the box and handed it to Ning Shu. There is one more thing that you may not know. Back then, Empress Xiaozhou pitied the siblings for being young and lonely. She often summoned them to the Phoenix Algae Palace to take care of them. Receiving the old file that a palace maid had personally written, Ning Shu said in surprise, "I have always heard people say that Empress Zhou was arrogant because she was pampered. She was crazy and bloodthirsty. She personally killed the previous crown prince and nearly 100 people in the Phoenix Algae Palace. She did not even let off her own daughter who was only a few years old. When the people talked about her, their expressions would change. I never thought that she would have such a soft side." Hearing her soft voice, it was like a fluffy rabbit gently scratching his chest. Xiao Qing curled his lips slightly. The human heart is the most complicated thing. When a person treats you with kindness, you will thank them profusely, worship them, and wish that you could do everything to praise them. When a person is your enemy, you will naturally portray them as the most vicious person in the world. The so-called history books were written by the victors, and this was how they were written. But how can there be so many people in the world who are completely black and white? These days, Tianwen went to find many palace maids who were released from the previous dynasty and are still alive. According to them, Empress Zhou is not a person who disregards human life. On the contrary, she is gentle and magnanimous most of the time. She is more compassionate towards the lowly palace maids. Ning Shu clenched her fist in the palm of her hand, as if she had just woken up from a dream. According to this, Empress Zhou was clearly indebted to Xiao Mingxue and her younger brother, but she later betrayed Empress Zhou and assisted His Majesty to become the protector princess. You can say that. Ning Shu's eyes deepened. Then, she once stayed by Empress Zhou's side for so long. Does that mean that she may have come into contact with that secret poison, the kiss of the plum blossom? Chapter 423. In addition, Xiao Mingxue's son-in-law, Han Qi, held the Minister of War's seal. No one else could get the new dagger more easily than him. Was it really her? The fog in front of her was getting thicker and thicker, blocking her line of sight. She couldn't even see her fingers in front of her and couldn't help but feel a bone-piercing chill. A hand reached out and placed in front of her. That hand was slender and white, with distinct joints. There was a thin layer of calluses on the fingertips. It wasn't as warm as an ordinary person's, but it was more reliable and powerful than anyone else's. In front of her, he said, whether it's Xiao Mingxue or others, no one can easily control our lives. If fire comes, I will extinguish it. If ice comes, I will shatter it. I want to see who dares to win this game of chess from my Xiao Qing's hands. He had always been calm and indifferent to life and death. It was rare for him to show his strong side, making Ningxu respect him. In the carriage, a wind lamp swayed slightly. The candlelight reflected the fiery red pomegranate pattern on the glass wall, leaving a bright red color on his face. He was full of fighting spirit and vitality, like the flames of a phoenix's nirvana, shining brightly and never extinguishing. Ningxu looked at him and then looked at his hand. It was as if the ice that had covered her body just now had disappeared. She smiled and put her hand in his palm. Okay, I believe you. Hui Mo, who was completely ignored, chewed the grape in his mouth and turned his face away angrily. Evil. All of them were disgusting to death. Why did they all come to bully a lonely child like him? If this continued, he would run away from home. When she heard his indignant muttering, Ningxu couldn't bear to give him some attention. By the way, Hui Mo, what did you find out about the sleeping clothes that old consort you left for 13th princess? Hearing this, Hui Mo's head drooped and he said with a sad face, Damn, don't mention it. I get a headache every time you mention it. The clues that old princess consort you left behind are too obscure. It's just a handful of blood-stained red threads. These days, I've tried almost 20 different poisons and fragrances. In the end, I realized that the blood wasn't mixed with any poison, but the juice of a kind of wisdom flower, also known as the devil's snare flower. This kind of flower is colorless, odorless, and poisonous. I really don't know why she left this for us. Colorless, odorless, and not poisonous. Ningxu furrowed her brows slightly and fell into deeper thought. About 300 feet away from the carriage, there was a sudden commotion. Hui Mo immediately opened the curtain and looked back. Yo, which family's silk pants are so arrogant, daring to drive a horse carriage on Vermilion Bird Street like this? Wasn't he afraid of attracting Yang Chengwei? Fortunately, it's at night. Otherwise, I would have hit and injured some passers-by. He stretched out his hand and raised the wind lantern with the words, Nanping Prince's Mansion. He originally wanted to remind the other party not to act rashly in front of his Shitzi. He didn't expect that after he raised the lantern, the other party didn't retreat. Instead, the wheels of the carriage rolled and the horse galloped towards their carriage. Shi Yan hurriedly drove the carriage to avoid colliding with each other. Hey! Shi Yan was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. He quickly stopped the carriage and glared at the other party. But before he could denounce them, the curtain of the carriage was lifted, and a young girl in a palace dress with pearls and emeralds on her head impatiently jumped out and ran towards them. When Ningxu saw her appearance, she was stunned for a moment. 13th princess. I finally found you, I finally found you. Xiao Zhangping's expression looked extremely anxious. Her pale lips kept trembling, as if she had fallen into a huge panic and was about to cry at any time. Ningxu walked down from the carriage and went forward to support the trembling princess. She softly comforted her, Princess, don't worry. If there's anything, you can tell me slowly. Xiao Zhangping's eyes turned red. Ningxu. Xiao Shitzi. You must help me. Chapter 424. Xiao Qing walked out of the carriage with the help of Hui Mo. She raised her head, and her beautiful face was reflected in Xiao Zhangping's eyes. Tears appeared on her face. She didn't care about anything else and stumbled into Xiao Qing's arms. Her tears fell like pearls from a broken necklace. Ningxu stood at the side with her arms crossed. It would be a lie if she said she wasn't jealous, but she was also curious about what he was going to do with this troublesome 13th princess. Princess, if you encounter any difficulties, just tell me. If I can help you, I will do my best. Xiahou Qing calmly held her arms and pulled her away from his chest. Xiao Zhangping's eyes were filled with disappointment when she left his arms. Then, Xiahou Qing comforted her with a handkerchief. It had to be said that this girl was pure and cute. Her love was straightforward and strong, and her hatred was frank and open. She didn't know how to hide her feelings. She was happy after a little coaxing. It was hard to hate her. Ning Shu thought for a moment and walked over to her and stroked her back. Princess, don't worry. Ning Shu will not stand by and do nothing. Xiao Zhangping wiped away the tears on his face and slowly began to narrate. The Southern Yan deputy envoy originally planned to depart tomorrow, but for some reason, he suddenly entered the palace this evening and requested to see me. He even said that he would carefully examine the golden body before departing tomorrow, so everything was foolproof. He must have heard from somewhere that I was preparing to escape, so he came to warn me. It must be like this. Before he left the palace, he said that the death of the envoy had made his king very dissatisfied. If there was a mistake in the marriage, he didn't know if the princess could bear the consequences. Xiao Zhangping choked with sobs again and looked at the two for help. Tell me, what should I do now? Ning Shu and Xiahou Qing frowned at the same time. They understood. If that was the case, then the cicada's shell-shedding tactic would not work. Firstly, the case of the envoy's sudden death had just been concluded a few days ago. Although Xue Qiongwei had taken the initiative to return to the Netherworld and Prime Minister Tan had taken the blame and resigned, to a certain extent, the Southern Yan monarch's anger had yet to be appeased. Under such circumstances, if Nan Yan were to get hold of another weakness, the saber in Nan Yan's hand that was hovering above Great Yu's head would definitely be swung down, causing an immeasurable disaster. Secondly, since the deputy had seen through their plan, there was no chance of success if they continued. However, to let the 13th princess accept her fate and marry into the Southern Yan kingdom to be a puppet for the rest of her life. It was impossible. Now, the situation had reached a dead end. You guys are so smart. You must be able to think of a way, right? Why aren't you saying anything? Seeing that both of them fell into silence at the same time, Xiao Zhangping's face turned paler. He grabbed Xiahou Qing's sleeves hard and said in a panic, if you really can't do it, child Xiahou, marry me. As long as you tell Imperial Father that you want to marry me, he will definitely find someone else to replace me in marriage. Child Xiahou, don't forget that you promised me. As long as I give you the sleeping clothes, you will definitely help me solve the marriage problem. You can't go back on your words. Child Xiahou. Facing Xiao Zhangping's earnest questioning and pleading eyes, no one could immediately say heartless words to completely cut off her hope. That was equivalent to directly pushing her into the fire pit. But to marry her. Xiahou Qing faced Ning Shu's direction. His black brocade and his cloud-like wide sleeves fluttered in the wind. Ning Shu silently clenched her fists. Chapter 425. Putting her palm back into her sleeve, Ning Shu smiled and said in a casual tone, perhaps we can put on a show. Xiao Zhangping nodded vigorously, yes. As long as we can deceive father, it will be fine. When the deputy envoy of Southern Yan leaves Great Yu with the other princess, it will not be a problem for your highness to immediately clarify. At that time, what is done cannot be undone. Even if father knows the truth, he will at most punish me. Prince Xiahou, I beg you, please help me. If I really go to Southern Yan, I will die. Prince, do you really have the heart to watch me die? Xiao Zhangping's voice was full of trembling. For freedom, this little princess who had always been proud threw her high self-esteem in the palm of her hand into the dust. Ning Shu watched silently from the side and couldn't help but feel a little distressed for her. Under Xiao Zhangping's expectant gaze, Xiahou Qing, who had been silent for a long time, finally opened his mouth and said, "I can immediately go to the palace and kowtow to His Majesty to keep the princess, but I'm sorry, I can't cooperate with the princess with this lie." The light in Xiao Zhangping's eyes immediately dimmed. Her face became paler, and she was at a loss. "Why? Is your highness worried about my reputation?" "I don't care. Even if the Jojo knows that I was abandoned by you after being engaged to you, I don't care. As long as I can escape this marriage, even if my reputation is ruined and I am pointed at by thousands of people, I won't mind. Not to mention that it is with you. Not only because of this reason, but also because I already have someone in my heart. I can't let her suffer the slightest grievance. Even if it is just a play, as long as there is a trace of sadness or misunderstanding in her heart, I won't allow it." In the thick ink of the night, Xiahou Qing shook his head, lowered his picturesque eyebrows, and bent his back to Xiao Zhangping. Hui Mo said in astonishment, "Prince." Ning Shu was also stunned. Xiao Zhangping subconsciously took a step back. Xiahou Qing waved his hand to order Hui Mo and the others to leave. He bent his thin back even deeper. "I'm sorry, Your Highness, if there is anything else that Xiahou Qing can do, I will not hesitate to go through water and tread on fire. But for this, please forgive Xiahou Qing for not being able to do it." Ning Shu's eyes were slightly moist. She had never seen him like this since she met him. In the eyes of the world, the Crown Prince of Nanping was precocious and ambitious at a young age. When he was 10 years old, he taught the Xiongnu a trick that lasted for 10 years. For such a person, even death could not make him lower his head, but in order to take care of her feelings and not make her sad, he lowered his proud head. Ning Shu couldn't help but feel sour at the tip of her nose. She didn't open her eyes. For a moment, she didn't know whether she was more moved or more distressed. Xiao Zhangping's whole body trembled violently. Her eyes were filled with thick ink like hatred. She took a few steps back and stretched out her hand. Every word was filled with endless hatred. "Good, good, good, I know. You two have deep feelings for each other and can move heaven and earth, but you want to see me fall into the fire pit? I, Xiao Zhangping, was blind to have misjudged you too. Are you sure that I won't reveal your secret? Anyway, running away from the marriage will lead to death. If I go to the southern Yan kingdom, I will die sooner or later. Then I will let you see me die in front of you. Princess." Under everyone's shocked gazes, Xiao Zhangping decisively pulled out a dagger from his sleeve and slit his own neck that was as fragile as a reed. Xiahou Qing immediately ordered, "Hui Mo, Shi Yan." Shi Yan was as fast as lightning. He took out a small slingshot and used a stone as a bullet to hit the dagger. Xiao Zhangping reached out to pick it up but was kicked away by Hui Mo. Finally, it fell into Ning Shu's hands. Xiao Zhangping pounced at Ning Shu again. Ning Shu reacted quickly and immediately threw the dagger far away from a courtyard wall. Xiao Zhangping angrily asked, "You won't save me or let me die? What do you want me to do? Since old princess you've passed away, I have been very miserable. Why do you even want to bully me?" She raised her hand and took out a silver hairpin from her cloud-like hair. "Ning Shu, you think that after throwing away my dagger, I have no other way? If I want to die, no one can stop me." Chapter 426. Ning Shu looked at the blood dripping down her snow-white neck like rose petals. Her eyes were like torches and her mind was like lightning. In a flash, an idea flashed through her mind. She said in a clear voice, "If the princess is not afraid of death, then it would be a pity to die here. I have a plan, but I don't know if the princess dares to try it." The sharp tip of the silver hairpin had already pierced through her flesh. Xiao Zhangping stared at her in disbelief. What plan? Speak. Ning Shu's voice was very steady, her expression very calm. If the princess is suddenly infected with an epidemic and is in imminent danger, even if you survive the 1,000-li journey and barely manage to marry into southern Yan, the epidemic will still be spread. In this kind of situation, even if His Majesty wants to be stubborn, Southern Yan's deputy envoy will think again and again. Xiao Zhangping briefly fell into thought, but quickly shook her head and denied, but at this time, where can I go to get infected with an epidemic? I heard that Southern Yan's diplomatic group has a Southern Yan's godly doctor. If I pretend, he will definitely see through it. Ning Shu approached her step by step without batting an eyelid. She softened her voice and said, therefore, this epidemic must be real. However, this also means that the princess will have to risk her life. The worst result is that even if the princess escapes the marriage, her life and death will be uncertain. Princess, please reconsider. The silver hairpin in her hand stopped. Xiao Zhangping's eyelashes trembled. She clearly heard Ning Shu's words. A moment later, she clenched her fists tightly. She had already made a decision, no need to reconsider, so be it. Rather than being a bird in a cage, it is better to die in Great Yu's territory. It can be considered staying in my homeland forever. Ning Shu took advantage of the situation and quickly walked over. She took the blood-stained hairpin from her hand and looked at her seriously. She extended her hand and said, please rest assured, princess. Ning Shu swears with her life that we will do everything we can to help the princess pass through this calamity. Xiao Zhangping hesitantly clapped hands with her and said in a trembling voice, good, I will believe you once more. If you dare to deceive me again, I will make you regret it. Ning Shu smiled. This subject believes that such a day will never come. Princess, please get on the carriage. Let's discuss where we should make this crucial move. Huemo, it's your turn now. Huemo pulled a long face. What? Why is it me again? Sigh, as expected, capable people can't escape the fate of working hard. Who asked me to be so outstanding? I'm really lonely like the snow. Ning Shu, she smiled and waved her hand, calling him over. She slapped him on the head and said, child, you're really arrogant. Come here and let me teach you how to be a good person. Roar. It hurts. I was wrong, okay. Sob, sob, sob. In the blink of an eye, the few people who were about to turn hostile had all sat in the same carriage. Even if Xiao Zhangping was as magnanimous as an ox and didn't care about trifles, he still felt somewhat uncomfortable. On the other hand, Ning Shu was very indifferent. She smiled and pushed the plate of grapes that Huemo loved the most in front of him. As the saying goes, give a candy after a slap. The most important thing now is how to catch the epidemic and what kind of epidemic it is. This kind of epidemic must be very contagious. At first glance, it can scare people. The other side is hiding a genius doctor. If the illness is too mild and the other side can easily cure it, we will definitely lose this game. But at the same time, it can't be too dangerous. This is because we need to ensure the safety of Princess Chongping to the greatest extent. In this aspect, little brother Huemo, you are the expert. I'll have to trouble you to think carefully. Chapter 428. This cow is very clever. Seeing that it hasn't been punished for bringing such a big gift, it opened its mouth even more arrogantly and moaned at Xiao Zhangping, then pooped again. Xiao Zhangping's green face suddenly turned black. She clutched her chest and almost fainted from anger. She is the dignified 13th princess, a golden branch and jade leaf. How could she be despised by a cow like this? She might as well die. No one can stop her. Huimo hurriedly stepped forward and pulled her back. Your Highness, don't go, calm down. Calm down. Under the moonlight, Huimo looked back at the cow and said in surprise, Huh? Princess Xiangping, your luck is really good. It just so happens that this cow has cowpox. After the time it takes to burn a stick of incense, Xiao Xiangping sat on a bench outside the cow pen. Her whole body tensed up. What do you want me to do next? Tell me. Huimo carefully put aside the cowpox mucus that he spent a lot of effort to collect, then lit a fire and put a sharp knife on the fire. Next, I will make a small cut on your Highness's arm and apply the cowpox mucus to your Highness's wound. After that, I will wait for Lady Ning and the others to bring the silver beard grass for you to eat. Later, when I cut the wound, it may be a little painful. Princess, please bear with it. Looking at the knife that gradually changed color on the fire, Xiao Xiangping gritted her teeth and rolled up her sleeves. She stretched out her snow-white lotus arm. No problem, you can do it. Under the moonlight, seeing Xiao Xiangping's stiff body and her other hand quietly clenched, Huimo blinked and said, Princess, are you afraid? Don't worry, when I was young, I was infected with cowpox by my master. At that time, one of my senior brothers went out to travel and brought back the smallpox virus. My master went to 18 slaughterhouses overnight to find the cowpox scab. He planted the cowpox scab on us and saved our lives. You see, am I not standing in front of you alive and kicking now? So, you can put your heart into your stomach. But starting tomorrow, there will be a lot of blisters on your body. It will be painful and itchy. You must remember not to touch them. Your Highness is so beautiful. If you leave a scar, it will be a pity. You said I'm beautiful. Xiao Xiangping's eyelashes trembled. She raised her glass-like eyes and looked at him with an expression of complete disbelief. She laughed at herself and said, Am I really beautiful? You're lying to me, aren't you? There were a total of 5 sisters in the palace. The 5th royal sister was valiant and straightforward, and had a heroic spirit. She was different from others, and she was the favorite of Father Emperor. The 9th royal sister was knowledgeable and gentle like water, and all the ministers in the court praised her. She had the appearance of a young phoenix. The 12th royal sister was as beautiful as a fairy when she was born, as if she had walked out of a painting. All the young masters in the capital flocked to her. Even the 14th royal sister, who was 2 years younger than me, was intelligent and good at reading people's minds. Only I have no background, no looks, and even my wisdom has not been favored by the heavens. You said I'm beautiful, but even I don't believe it. Listening to her, Huimo frowned and disagreed. Although I haven't seen many girls, I have examined countless corpses. Men and women, old and young, I have seen everything. The princess is definitely one of the most beautiful people I have ever seen. How can you belittle yourself like this? Look at your facial features, there is no part that is not beautiful. Especially your lips, they are thin and thick, and the shape is beautiful. Even if you are angry, you are still very beautiful. At least you are better than the corpses I have examined. Ah! I'm not saying that you are only better than those corpses, but not living people. I have seen some of the girls in the Moon Lake and the Search House. You are also more beautiful than them. Ah! Your Highness, don't be angry. I didn't mean to compare you with those girls. Bah! Look at my broken mouth. What I mean is that your Highness is very beautiful, and your temperament is simple and straightforward. You dare to love and hate. You are different from those people in the palace. It's just that you don't look confident. If you are more confident, you will be more dazzling. Under the moonlight, the boy's eyes were like 2 obsidian stones, clearly falling into the spring water. Just by looking at it, you will be infected by the sincere brilliance inside. Xiao Zhangping's heart was unconsciously warmed. Chapter 429. After a short moment of astonishment, Xiao Zhangping smiled. "Thank you for your compliment. In my impression, other than my mother and old Princess Yu, no one else has said that I am good. They only said that I am simple-minded and that I am arrogant and reckless just because I am a princess. I even shamelessly took the initiative to pursue a man who disdained me. So, thank you very much." Being thanked by a girl so solemnly, Hui Mo's face burned. He scratched his head and said, No need, no need. Your Highness is too polite." Xiao Zhangping pinched the corner of her dress and gathered her courage to ask, "Then can you tell me, if I am as good as you said, why doesn't your Highness like me?" As a lonely young man, Hui Mo's heart was broken into pieces when he was asked about his feelings. He hissed in pain and patted his head. He racked his brain for a long time and almost exhausted all his wisdom before he said, "I think, maybe it is because you are not destined to be the one. Just like how the world is so big and there are so many good people in Zhuzhou and hundreds of countries. It is not easy to fall in love with someone who is beautiful and has a good temperament. Everyone should have their own destined person." Before meeting him, all the people they knew were nothing more than fleeting clouds. After meeting him, their souls found a place to return to. After that, he was the one sitting, walking, eating, sleeping, living, and dying. The one who wanted to cross the bridge of helplessness together with him was also the one who wanted to cross the bridge of helplessness. There is no reason, regardless of beauty or ugliness, regardless of pros and cons, it should be like this. Your Highness should be like this to Lady Ning. Your Highness may not know, but I have been with Your Highness for 10 years. Your Highness was not like this in the past. Since he was infected with that disease, he fell into a state that was completely different from ordinary people. As his 5 senses disappeared one by one, it was as if his 7 emotions and 6 desires were slowly dissipating as well. Especially after he couldn't even see his eyes, he didn't say a single word that day. He sat alone on the bed for an entire night. He would respond to whoever came to talk to him, but anyone could tell that he had changed even more. His entire person revealed a gray color. He had no desires, no sorrow, no joy, as if he was prepared to welcome death. Does the princess know how terrifying that state is? He didn't care about what he ate, whether it was what he used to hate the most, as long as he was full. He didn't care about what he wore every day, the furnishings in the house, and everything around him. After all, he couldn't see. Other than drinking tea and raising birds, he had abandoned all his previous hobbies. Chapter 431. In the guest house of the foreign imperial court, there was a light knock on the room where divine Dr. Duan was staying. Duan Changfeng got up and opened the door suspiciously, only to see an ordinary-looking odd-job worker silently hand him a handwritten letter, then turned around and left. Half an hour later, in a tea-house near the post house, Duan Changfeng, under the personal guidance of the owner, walked through a winding corridor of flowers, then passed through a quiet and secluded bamboo forest, and finally saw the tea-house built on the water. Outside the tea-house, a clear spring was flowing, the white stones were lively, the orchids by the water were lush, and 1 or 2 short pine trees were planted here and there. It really was a picture drawn on paper, the meaning of the immortal poet's pen. The tea-house was surrounded by water, and there was only one bamboo path leading to it. Inside the open door and window, a thin and straight figure was sitting under the window, carefully sipping tea. Looking at his graceful bearing, he was even more graceful than before. "Ha ha ha, Your Highness Crown Prince, long time no see." Seeing an old friend, Duan Changfeng immediately walked in, but when he looked to the side and saw the black cloth in front of his eyes, he couldn't help but sigh. "After we parted at the border, we haven't seen each other for 3 years. I didn't expect your Highness Crown Prince to have changed so much. It's exactly as Lord Zifan said, how many autumns have passed. Hearing the voice of an old friend, Xiao Qing extended his arms in invitation. The two sat opposite each other and personally poured a cup of tea for Duan Chongfeng. Xiao Qing smiled. I also didn't expect that in just a few years, Mr. would change and become the divine doctor of Southern Yen. If it weren't for my subordinates accidentally investigating Mr., I wouldn't have known that this divine doctor was you. Duan Chongfeng took a sip of the tea and put it down. He looked at the frost on his temples, the wrinkles on his face, and his eyes, which had become cloudy and old because of the passage of time. He could not help but sigh and say, the fate of a man is so unpredictable, and no one can predict it. When my junior sister and I left our sect and entered Jianghu for the first time, we were full of hot-bloodedness. Who would have thought that we would encounter such a thing later on, leaving our true love, friends dead, and our sect dead? We were like wild dogs, deserted by everyone. If it weren't for the fact that I was lucky enough to receive your help, I'm afraid that my bones would have been blown to dust by the sandstorm at the border. Afterwards, when the war was over, I looked around and found that I had nowhere to go. By a freak combination of factors, I saved the wife of a wealthy merchant from the Southern Yen Kingdom. With their help, I entered the Imperial Hospital of the Southern Yen Kingdom step by step. Chapter 432. Duan Chongfeng's weathered eyes were filled with deep nostalgia. He lowered his head and shook it. Let's not talk about that. Your Highness didn't come late at night just to catch up with me. If there's anything you want to say, just say it. I'll do my best. Xiao Qing was not pretentious. I know that you are of noble character, so I will not beat around the bush with you. Tomorrow, the Southern Yen Vice Emissary will most likely invite you to the palace to verify something. When the time comes, I would like to ask for your assistance. Duan Chongfeng laughed heartily. It's just a small matter. The Crown Prince and I are friends who have gone through life and death together. There's no need to be so courteous. It'll make us seem distant. Xiao Qing also laughed. I'm treating you like an outsider. I'll use tea in place of wine to punish myself by drinking 3 cups. Good, good, good. I'll drink with your Highness. After a few cups of tea, the two exchanged their experiences in the past few years and talked happily. It was already the second half of the night. In order to prevent other Southern Yen envoys from finding out, Duan Chongfeng left first. Xiao Qing stood up to send him off and said, Mister, why did you come to the capital incognito? Duan Chongfeng looked at the gurgling water outside the window and the reflection of the moon in the water. He suddenly smiled, and some kind of deep thought floated in his eyes. I'm a person with half my body buried in the earth. What can I do? I haven't returned for many years and miss my hometown, so I took the opportunity to come back and see it. After seeing it, I'll leave forever. Who are you? Get out of my way. In front of the gate of Divine Marshal, about 100 feet away, the sleeping Xuanwu Street was awakened by a delicate voice. Xiao Zhangping lifted the curtain and looked at the person in the middle of the road. She couldn't help but feel a chill in her heart. This person was wearing a black cloak, and even a strand of hair was hidden in the darkness. He stood quietly in the middle of the street and looked at her. She couldn't see anything except for the pair of bright eyes under the cloak, which made her feel numb all over. Not long after she separated from Ning Shu, her personal maid Hong Fei noticed that someone had been following them. She looked back several times and didn't see anyone. She thought Hong Fei was being paranoid. She didn't expect this person to really exist. And he only showed up when they reached the gate of Divine Marshal. What did this mean? This person was not afraid of being discovered by the Imperial Guards who were 100 zhang away. Xiao Zhangping glared at her and scolded again. didn't you hear what this princess said? It's late at night, this princess doesn't want to be entangled with you. If you know what's good for you, then quickly scram. The person under the cloak laughed. Her voice was soft and hoarse, but there was a hint of tenacity. It was a woman. She lowered her voice and said slowly, there are some things that can only be said in the dead of night. Your Highness, please calm down. I have a deal that I think you will be very interested in. Xiao Zhangping glared and said, no matter what the deal is, this princess is not interested. This princess will give you one last chance. The palace gate is right in front of you. As long as this princess gives the order, the imperial guards will immediately rush over to surround you and sentence you to death. You're not leaving. Hong Fei, go and call for help. Hong Fei got the order and immediately jumped out of the carriage to call for people. She heard the woman suddenly raise her voice and said, slow down. Dark clouds covered half of the moon. Under the slightly dim moonlight, the woman walked towards Xiao Zhangping step by step. She slowly lifted her cloak and exposed her face under the moonlight. She also exposed her face in front of Xiao Zhangping. Princess, don't you want to know who I am? Then I will lift this cloak. I don't know if Princess dares to look. When she saw the woman's face, Xiao Zhangping was shocked and took a deep breath. The dagger that she had been secretly holding in her hand to defend herself fell to the ground. Why, is it you? Chapter 433. Miss, this way, come in, come in. Hearing Ning Shu's signal, Forsythia, who had been guarding near the small door, quickly pulled the bolt and opened a gap. She poked her head out and waved at Ning Shu. Ning Shu slid into the door like a loach and whispered, where are father and mother? Forsythia cleverly said, don't worry, master and madam have already fallen asleep. This servant has been keeping an eye on them for you. Ning Shu praised, that's good, my good Forsythia, it's been hard on you. Tomorrow, I will definitely find a handsome and elegant husband for you. Forsythia drooped her head and pitifully said, my good miss, how can you still be in the mood to tease this servant? Is it possible for this servant to discuss something with you? Please don't leave as soon as you say. This servant is not smart. These past 2 days, in order to fool you, my hair is almost falling out. Previously, there was an excuse to investigate the case. The day before yesterday, you left without saying goodbye and didn't return all night. Today, you finally came back, but the sky was dark and you went out again. You also know that this servant is sharp, this servant's flowery words are not enough. Being swept by this servant's eyes, this servant's courage was scared to death. Ning Shu put her hands together and opened her pair of wet eyes. Okay, I promise you, there won't be a next time, okay? Good Forsythia, please forgive me. Good, there won't be a next time. Ning Shu and Forsythia tiptoed through the stone path in the middle of the garden. Just as they were about to enter the flower corridor connected to their courtyard, they were caught red-handed. Princess Heaxian clenched her handkerchief and clasped her hands in front of her. She had an appearance of questioning. Then tell me, what have you been doing these past 2 days? Don't try to coax me by saying that you missed Master Hui Xi, so you rushed to visit her. Your mother, don't look like a fool. Ning Shu smiled guiltily. He, I just went to get a relic of my master. The wind is cold at night. Mother, your health is not good. If you stand for a long time, I'm afraid you will catch a cold. Shu will immediately help you go back to rest. If you have something to say, it's not too late. As a mother, how could Heaxian not see through her little tricks? She continued with a straight face, don't worry, it's already summer, I won't be cold anymore. But my good daughter, as soon as she came back, she went to sleep, and when she woke up, she went out to run around. Anyway, I can't even catch a shadow of her. If I don't wait for you here, as a mother, where can I find you? He. Xian was like a soft knife, quickly and accurately stabbing Ning Shu's little heart. She wanted to be thick-skinned and laugh, but after thinking about it, it was better to confess, "Mother, I'm wrong." A child's soft words were always the best weapon to deal with a mother. Xian's belly was full of anger, but in the end, it turned into a helpless you. She waved her hand and took Ning Shu into her arms. She gently stroked her satin-like hair, just like when she was a child. She softly coaxed her to sleep. Since childhood, we know that you are smart and witty, and your mind is far more active than ordinary people. Even the young masters of the various manors in the capital are not better than you. This is a good thing, but also a bad thing. I cannot pursue today's matter, but you must promise me that in the future, you will not have anything to do with that Xiaoqing. Ning Shu's palms clenched, and the arms that were supporting Xian slowly bent her knees. She was guilty but firm. "Mother, daughter can promise you anything else, but this, daughter can't do anything." The pain of 7 lives of reincarnation, she struggled and fell into the endless abyss every day. The wind around her was like a knife, repeatedly cutting her into pieces. Every day, she secretly hoped that someone would pass by, see her suffering, generously reach out and help her, even if it was just one person. But for a whole 300 years, she did not see anyone, until this life. This person was the only one who wanted to kill her a few times, but every time, he let go of the hand that was strangling her neck. Obviously, he looked cold and indifferent, but he repeatedly reached out to help her when she was about to be in trouble. She fell into Shui Ran's trap, and when she fell into the underground palace, she almost thought that it was over, and she did not live a good life. She had already made a gesture of farewell, but she did not expect that he would also come down. She was clearly a sickly person who did not know how many days she had left after being poisoned. No matter how much she tried to be brave, she could not be compared to him. But he jumped down, and used the black brocade that he never left to tie around her waist, and held her in his hands. In that moment of shock, her throat was choked, and she silently thought in her heart, "Maybe it's this person. You held me, I will not let you go in this life." Later on, under a coincidence, she found out his true identity. She thought that he was her lucky chance in this life, but she did not expect that he was a red bean that was planted 300 years ago. So, what reason did she have to let go? Chapter 434. Looking at her daughter kneeling in front of her, who was as beautiful as a magnolia flower bud, Xian's heart ached. She said in a trembling voice, "You have been a filial child since you were a child. You have never disobeyed me. You have made up your mind on this matter, haven't you?" Ning Shu couldn't bear it, but she had to insist, "Mother, please forgive me." Xian said involuntarily, "Do you know that you will die if you are with him?" Ning Shu suddenly frowned and looked up. "Mother, do you know something about Xiaoqing? Why do you say such things again and again to prevent me from being close to him? The same goes for the engagement with Tan Xiaoqing. In the past, you would discuss with me before making a decision. Only this time, you are so arbitrary. It is as if you are eager to put me into the wedding sedan and get rid of Xiaoqing from then on. I don't think it's just his illness. What do you know that you've been keeping a secret from me?" Knowing that she had said something wrong, Xian's face flashed a moment of panic. She looked away and said, "I don't know anything. It's just that Xiahou Shizi's identity is extraordinary. The position of Nanping Mansion in the court has always been hidden. His Majesty is afraid of it. If you marry into Nanping Mansion, I will worry about it every day. That's why I said that." Ning Shu was suspicious. "Is that all?" Xian sighed and helped her up. "What else can it be? Your mother doesn't leave the house all day long, and I don't know what's going on outside. How could I know the secrets in your head that you're imagining? I also heard the maids talk in private that Xiahou Shizhi is quite popular with women. In Yunnan province, many infatuated women have committed suicide for him. The 13th princess in the palace also favors him. Handsome men always make women cry. I am afraid that you will be hurt one day. After thinking for a long time, Ning Shu still couldn't figure out the reason. She smiled and said, "Mother, you're worrying too much. I choose someone because I think he's worth it. If one day I find out that I've misjudged someone and that person isn't worthy of my devotion, then I'll immediately withdraw my feelings. Your daughter is very clever and definitely won't make a losing deal. What's more, my mother had to walk through the gates of hell to give me life. I treasure her a lot." He Axayan was amused by her deliberately winking and playing tricks. She helplessly patted her hand. "You little mouth, anyway, I can't talk to you. In any case, you have to take mother's words to heart and think about it carefully. It's already the Cho hour, mother will accompany you to rest." "Mother, will you accompany me?" "That's right. Ever since Ji-er was born, I've been busy taking care of him and often neglected you. It's been a long time since we've talked about intimate things. It's also been a long time since your mother hugged you to sleep like when you were young. Mother still remembers that you were soft and small when you were born. It seems like it's only been a blink of an eye. How did you grow so big?" He Axayan held her face and her eyes were slightly wet. Ning Shu acted like a spoiled child and rubbed her face against her palm. She softly said, "Mother, rest assured. No matter how big Shu-er grows, I will always be the little girl who relies on you and loves you." Ning Shu intimately held Hiaxian's hand and the mother and daughter went into the room to rest. That night, Ning Shu tightly held her mother's hand as she slept. Under the weak candlelight, Hiaxian touched her hair and stroked her back. She didn't sleep for a long time. She looked at Ning Shu's sleeping face for a long time. Her eyes seemed to be a little wet. She reluctantly bowed her head and let her lips print on her forehead. "My baby, you must be good in the future." Chapter 435. After a short 4 hours of sleep, Ning Shu opened her eyes as soon as the sky brightened. She looked at the empty space beside her, but there was still some warmth left, as well as the gentle and pleasant smell of her mother. Just like when she was a child, she buried her head in her mother's blanket and sniffed carefully. As long as she was by her mother's side, she would always be happy to be a child who never grew up. However, Ning Shu recalled her mother's evasiveness when she spoke last night. She felt that there was more to her mother's words, that there were still many things she hadn't said. She had a feeling that it had something to do with Xiahou Qing. It might even have something to do with the destruction of her Ning family in her previous life. However, her mother insisted on not saying anything. She didn't even want to reveal the slightest detail. What kind of secret was it that made her so fearful and secretive? He had to think of a way to deal with it. While she was deep in thought, the door creaked open. Forsythia came in with a basin of water. "Miss, you're awake." Ning Shu lazily waved her hand at Forsythia. "Good Forsythia, come and give me a massage." Forsythia obediently put down the basin like a little wife and sat by the bed to massage her shoulders. "Miss, do you have something important to do today?" Ning Shu lifted the blanket and got up. "Yes, it's something very, very important. It concerns Princess Chomping's happiness for the rest of her life. With the princess's impatient personality, she's probably anxious by now. We have to hurry." "Oh right, when did mother leave?" "About an hour ago. She specially got up to make some red bean and barley soup for you. She personally took care of the heat. When it was done, she was afraid that she would wake you up, so she went back to her room to rest. Before she left, she specifically told me to make sure you drink this soup. I'll bring it over right now. Ning Shu smiled. Good, good, good. Mother personally made it. Not to mention red bean and barley soup, even if it was poison, would drink it without leaving a drop behind. After drinking the soup and freshening up, Ning Shu rushed to the palace to have an audience. Ning Shu, you're finally here. Why are you so slow? Do you know that I was so nervous that I couldn't sleep the whole night? I was so anxious waiting. In the end, she was still a little girl who had never experienced anything. Even when she was angry, she still looked cute. As soon as he saw Ning Shu, Xiao Zhangping came forward to greet her. Her face was covered with a veil, and the heavy bruises under her eyes revealed her night of tossing and turning. Ning Shu had taken the pills prepared by Huemo in advance, and she was not as contagious as smallpox. Therefore, she was not afraid of her. Your Highness, calm down. I will go to the palace at noon to have a state banquet with His Majesty. After that, I will ask you to come back with me. Before that, please don't be impatient. By the way, how is His Highness's cowpox? After being comforted by Ning Shu, Xiao Zhangping's uneasy mood calmed down a little. She glanced around and ordered Hongfei to go outside to guard. Only then did she dare to remove her veil and reveal her arms. Ning Shu nodded her head. Huemo's craftsmanship is really good. Looking with the naked eye, these blisters are not much different from smallpox. Anyway, ordinary people like me can't tell. The rouge on your forehead needs to be swept a little more to make the illusion that you are feverish. Xiao Zhangping sat in front of the dressing table. Ning Shu bent down and carefully applied a layer of rouge on her forehead. Looking at Ning Shu's serious face and eyes, Xiao Zhangping unconsciously dug her nails into her palm. She said with uncertainty, Ning Shu, do you really think that we can deceive father and the others? Chapter 436. As the saying goes, one should not sit under the awning. The higher one stands, the more they care about their own life, not to mention the smallpox that can make one's complexion change. Even if they have doubts in their hearts, so what? As long as there is the slightest possibility of the smallpox being transmitted back to Southern Yan, to their Majesty and princes, none of them will dare to take such a huge risk and bear such a huge responsibility. Moreover, it doesn't matter to Southern Yan who they marry. They just want a marriage that can control Great Yu. As long as the princess is fearless in the face of danger, I believe it will work. Moreover, I will dress up as a palace maid and accompany the princess. Listening to her calm voice, Xiao Zhangping nodded with conviction, and, what you said is very reasonable. I shouldn't be afraid. The more nervous I am, the easier it is to reveal a flaw. Ning Shu praised, Your Highness is right. Xiao Zhangping's face reddened and angrily said, Are you coaxing me like a child? How old do you think I am? You are offending your superiors. Ah, she found out. However, Ning Shu already knew her temper like the back of her hand, so she wasn't afraid at all. She continued to coax her in the same tone, Yes, yes, yes. My daughter offended her superior and offended the princess. Your Highness is a great person, so please forgive me. You. Xiao Zhangping was so angry that her face reddened even more. She angrily gritted her teeth and glared at her, You are so annoying and sharp-tongued. I don't know what Xiahou Shizhi sees in you. Other than your face being a little better, there is nothing attractive about you. The princess is right. He can't see anything, so it's not that he likes me. It's that I swindled him and used all my tricks to trick him. Xiao Zhangping was furious, treacherous and cunning. Ning Shu said, Who said it isn't? Unfortunately, Xiahou Shizhi likes this advantage of mine the most. Xiao Zhangping bickered for a long time. She was so angry that she was dizzy and forgot about her nervousness. She was silent for a while. After a while, she said, "Thank you, Ning Shu. Thank you for being willing to accompany me." Ning Shu curved her glass-like eyes. The sunlight penetrated through the window lattice, casting a fragmented light in her eyes. "It's Ning Shu's honor to be able to serve the princess." "Is that so?" Xiao Zhangping whispered. Ning Shu keenly captured the change in her tone. She raised her head, but before she could ask, "What's wrong with the princess?" Xiao Zhangping suddenly raised his hand and pierced the thin needle hidden between his fingers into Ning Shu's neck. Ning Shu widened her eyes and subconsciously dodged and counterattacked, but an inexplicable numbness instantly swept through her limbs and bones, sucking away all the strength in her body, causing her to slowly collapse. The feeling of being betrayed made her throat itch, but more than that, she felt endless disappointment and anger from the bottom of her heart. "Zhangping, princess, why?" She had always regarded Xiao Zhangping as a lonely child with a bitter fate. Although she occasionally acted rudely and mischievously, her heart was still clear and pure, so she had never been too wary of her. But she never thought that it would be the farmer and the snake again. "Ning Shu, in the end, you're blind again." Every word came from the depths of her soul. It was like a whip that fiercely lashed Xiao Zhangping's body, causing her eyes to turn red and her face to be filled with endless guilt. She kept shaking her head, not daring to look at her questioning eyes. "Ning Shu, don't look at me like that, please." Hong Fei heard her voice and immediately came in. "Princess, calm down. This servant will help you carry Lady Ning to the bed." "Ah, okay." Xiao Zhangping didn't dare to look at her from beginning to end until the two of them worked together to carry Ning Shu to the bed. Before Ning Shu fainted, the last thing she heard was Xiao Zhangping kneeling in front of the bed, sobbing in shame. "Ning Shu, I'm sorry, I'm also sorry, there's no other way. When you know the truth in the future, you'll forgive me. Ning Shu, I'm sorry." Chapter 437. The spring river is connected to the sea, and the bright moon on the sea rises with the tide. Rippling with the waves for thousands of miles, where is the spring river without the moon? The river flows around the fragrant meadow, and the moonlight illuminates the flower forest. Frost flies in the air, and the white sand on the shore cannot be seen. At the banquet in Weiyang Palace, everyone toasted each other and was in harmony. His Majesty and Empress Chao were present, and all the princes and civil and military officials were present. Xiahou Qing represented the South pacifying Wang estate, so he could not be absent. His Majesty originally wanted Xiahou Qing to sit on the first seat on his left to show that he valued him, but Xiahou Qing refused with the excuse that he was tired and liked peace. Even so, he still received a roll of the eyes from the fourth prince, Xiao Yunsu. Fortunately, Xiahou Qing did not take him seriously at all. After experiencing consort Qi's madness and falling out of favor, Xiao Yunsu's temperament was more sinister than before, and his pair of phoenix eyes were faintly evil. He watched from the sidelines as the emperor favored Xiahou Qing in every possible way. He raised his head and downed a mouthful of wine. He made a strange sound. "Xiahou Shizi is indeed extraordinarily charming." As soon as he saw you, Fu Wang's brows relaxed. "I should be glad that you were not born in the Xiao family. Otherwise, we brothers would not even have the chance to hope for the position of crown prince." "Sixth brother, seventh brother, don't you think so?" Xiao Yunsu's ridicule was particularly ear-piercing in this harmonious atmosphere. Jiu Si could not help but frown, but Xiahou Qing was still indifferent. He continued to sit upright and drink wine, turning a deaf ear. But the more he acted like this, the angrier Xiao Yunsu became. "Xiahou Shizi is really calm. It's just that some people have wild ambitions, but don't have the body to match them. The heavens really have opened their eyes. Jiu Si immediately said, Your Highness, please pay attention to your words. Who do you think you are? How dare you bark in front of this prince? Who gave you the guts? What, do all the servants of the South pacifying Wang estate want to ride on the heads of the imperial princes to show off? What big ambitions? Do you want to bring disaster to the country or start a rebellion? Seeing that a huge accusation was about to fall on the heads of the Nanping mansion, his intention couldn't be more obvious. He wanted to kill the Nanping mansion and Xiahou Qing. The situation immediately became tense, and even His Majesty cast a sharp gaze in their direction. Xiahou Qing put down the wine cup in his hand. His face was still calm, but his body faintly emitted a trace of murderous aura. Hui Mo angrily pressed down on his sword and wanted to argue with him. However, he was stopped by Xiahou Qing. Xiao Yini glanced at him and did not say a word, making it clear that he was going to be a bystander. Xiao Yunsen lived up to his reputation as the Prince of Six Orifices. He had a deep friendship with Xiahou Qing, and Ning Shu's Xiahou Qing had done him a great favor in the case of the envoy. Therefore, he raised his wine cup and said with a big smile, Fourth brother, what are you doing? Originally, it was just a joke between brothers. Why did it become so serious? Come, let's drink. I'll say this first, I have no intention of becoming the crown prince. Father knows very well how much weight I have in my stomach. I've already thought about it. In the future, it doesn't matter who inherits the throne. You just have to give me the title of an idle prince, just like little uncle. All I do is eat, drink, play, listen to music, and pick up courtesans. I'm as free as a god. Even if the Jade Emperor gives me the title of heavenly official, I won't do it. Even Xiahou Prince thinks the same, right? Paw! A fan hit the back of his head. Xiao Yunsen cried out and held his head in pain. Little uncle, what are you doing? Xiao Minglan walked out from behind him with a cold smile. Just because you're ignorant and incompetent, do you think Xiahou Prince is as unambitious as you? Eat, drink, play, listen to music, and pick up courtesans. In your eyes, your little uncle is just an idle, ignorant, and incompetent playboy of the royal family, right? Xiao Yunsen muttered, what's wrong with being a playboy? Playboys are good, playboys are good, playboys are wonderful, playboys are happy. Hey! Spare me, little uncle. I'm wrong. In my eyes, little uncle is wise and mighty, tall and dignified. Your nephews will look up to you and imperial father to forge ahead. Xiao Minglan looked at his cowardly flattery. She kept her fan and smiled lazily. She flicked the hem of her robe and sat down casually. She looked at Xiao Yunsu from the corner of her eyes. Since ancient times, the crown prince's position has been based on the first wife's position. Those who are ambitious will have to rely on their own abilities. I've never seen such a joke in the history books. Xiao Si, what do you think? Besides, today's banquet is to send off the southern Yan envoys. If you embarrass the other countries with a quarrel, that would be a real joke. After being slapped in the face, Xiao Yunsen's expression turned ugly. He smiled maliciously. Little uncle is right. We'll see who will win in the end. When the time comes, the winner takes all. I'd like to see who will kneel at whose feet. A storm was suppressed by Xiao Minglan. Xiahou Qing nodded slightly. Thank you, Prince Ku, for helping me out. Xiao Minglan yawned and waved her hand. Hey, you don't have to be so polite with me. I haven't played Madiao for a long time. Next time, I'll drag you and the girl from the Ning family to play 300 rounds. This time, I'll definitely defeat you under the table. Xiao Minglan was winking and making faces as she spoke happily. Suddenly, a eunuch announced, "A great elder princess has arrived." The smile on Xiao Minglan's face froze for a moment. She yawned again and leaned lazily against the back of the chair to rest. When great elder Princess Xiao Mingxue walked past him, her footsteps stopped beside him for a while. Then she continued to walk towards His Majesty with a smile while tugging at her flowery clothes. This moment of strangeness was so fast that it was hard to catch. However, it didn't escape Xiahou Qing's ears. His ears moved slightly. His slender fingers slowly rubbed the mouth of the jade porcelain cup, as if he was deep in thought. Chapter 438. After the eldest princess sat down, the banquet officially began. The sound of singing and dancing lingered in the air as they gracefully wrapped around the slender, white, and soft arms of the beauties. It was a scene of prosperity that was charming and extravagant, causing one to be intoxicated with a single glance. Under the cover of the music, Huimo angrily bent down and whispered in Xiahou Qing's ear, "Shi Ziyi, why didn't you let me reason with the fourth prince just now?" He clearly knows that today's occasion is unusual, but he still targeted our Nanping mansion and you. He is extremely vicious. Xiahou Qing's fingers gently tapped along with the melody of the court musician and said casually, "It is because today's occasion is unusual that we can't act rashly. He chose this day and place to make things difficult for us in order to force us to show our anger. What he wants to do is very simple. The first step is to provoke us into going against him. The second step is to continue adding fuel to the fire. The moment you draw your sword in front of His Majesty, that will be the beginning of His Majesty's suspicion and the beginning of our destruction. Huimo, you have always been impulsive. You have to be more careful in the future. Don't fall into such a shallow trap." Huimo was confused. His Majesty has trusted you so much recently, especially his head disease. Every time, the imperial doctors couldn't help him. Only when you came to the palace with him did His Majesty calm down a little. How could he be bewitched by his baseless words? Yes, His Majesty does favor me, but I'm afraid he favors the military power of our Nanping mansion more. The southern Yan kingdom is pressing on step by step. Although this time it was resolved by marriage, in my opinion, there will be a war between the two countries within 3 years. His Majesty is beginning to grow old. When he still has the strength, he will want to make a political achievement that will be remembered in history. However, old Prince Yu passed away, the Shui family was turned into powder, and the Song family, the Defender General of the state, also lost the direct line. At present, only our Nanping mansion still has the strength to fight. This strength is what we rely on to gain a foothold, but it may also be the fire that causes a disaster. If we lose ourselves, this war will be lost. Huimo scratched his head and said confusedly, "But I don't think it's just like that. The way His Majesty looks at you is very kind and generous, just like the way His Highness looks at you. I don't think he just treats you as a subject. It seems that I'm too naive. The people in the palace are too gloomy and scary. Our Yunnan province is better." He thought about it and was still unconvinced, but we were humiliated by the fourth prince like this. How can we just let it go? Just now, he kept saying that you won't live long. I'm so angry. I'm really angry. Chapter 439. No one knew what was going on. The entire place fell silent and no one dared to make a sound. Above the jade steps, on the dragon throne, His Majesty supported his chin with his hand and said with a faint smile, "Mingxue, what's wrong with you? Are you dissatisfied with the marriage I bestowed? Or do you think my sons aren't good enough for your precious little princess?" Xiao Mingxue's expression froze for a moment before she continued to cover her mouth and laugh. "Royal brother, what kind of joke is this? Royal brother's sons are all outstanding youths. I'm envious of any one of them. How can I be dissatisfied? Even if they aren't good enough, it's my stupid girl who isn't good enough for my imperial nephews. Imperial brother, you don't know, but my Rui girl has been spoiled by me and the prince consort. She doesn't see the big picture and is full of arrogance. She throws tantrums all day long and can't even say a word. Otherwise, she'll cry non-stop. Even I blush when I say it. How could someone with such a temper be worthy of the position of imperial consort? His Majesty laughed. How is that not seeing the big picture? She's clearly naive and cute, pure and innocent. That's why she doesn't know how to hide it. I admire this kind of child the most. This kind of pure laughter is also lacking in my palace. What's more, Mingxue, I don't believe that the child you raised will be bad. Whoever marries Harue will be the one with the greatest fortune. Imperial brother, you flatter me. I'm afraid I'll have to blush on Rui girl's behalf. After some banter, Xiao Mingxue sighed and the corners of her eyes became moist. I won't hide it from Imperial brother. Actually, I wasn't willing to marry Harue just now. It's not for any other reason, but because Imperial brother knows that I only have one child. She's still young and I really can't bear to marry her off so early. Otherwise, the prince consort and I will be lonely in the future. We don't know how to live our lives. You're wrong. How can a daughter not marry? Instead of marrying an outsider and worrying about her well-being, why not marry my child? If Harue is wronged in the future, as the imperial aunt, you can scold her as much as you want. I definitely won't stop you. Xiao Bin, call the other brats over. Your Majesty summons the 4th prince, 6th prince, 7th prince, and 8th prince to have an audience with the emperor. Xiao Yunsu and the others immediately left their seats and stepped forward. Greetings to Imperial Father, greetings to Imperial Aunt. His Majesty waved his hand casually and said with a smile, Mingxue, you can choose which one to be your son-in-law. Xiao Mingxue clenched her fists tightly, but the emperor had already cut off her path of retreat. She had no other choice but to slowly get up and walk in front of Xiao Yunsu and the others. Of the 4 princes of the right age, the 8th prince, Xiao Yunjin, was the youngest. Chapter 440. His Majesty was overjoyed when he ordered a marriage that was destined by heaven. He bestowed the imperial wine to everyone to taste. After the eldest princess accompanied His Majesty and drank 3 cups of wine, she excused herself and went out to sober up. Not long after, Xiao Minglan stood up lazily and said, "TSK, the songs and dances in the palace only have these few tricks. Compared to those outside the palace, it is very boring, very boring. This prince has no interest in watching. I'm leaving." After saying that, he also staggered out. Hui Mo's eyes turned and he was curious. He bent down and said, "Your Highness, it's interesting here. Shall we follow them and take a look?" Xiahou Qing knocked his head with the jade chopsticks and sneered, "When did you learn the habit of gossiping from Tianwen? Childish." Hui Mo groaned and said, "If you don't want to go, then don't go. Why do you have to hit me? Your Highness, you hit me too hard. Before Lady Ning was born, His Highness treated him so well. Since he had Lady Ning, his treatment had plummeted. He was no longer the little jacket in His Highness's heart." Sigh. Xiahou Qing put down the jade chopsticks and rubbed his knuckles. "We'll go." "Who said we won't go? But we just happened to go out to sober up. Let's go. Be careful not to be noticed." Hui Mo watched his Shitzi get up and straighten his dark robe. He reached out his hand to Jussi and leisurely walked out of the palace. Hui Mo rubbed his aching head, cursed in his heart, and followed him silently. They were not far from the Imperial Garden and they all had internal energy. Soon, they found a rockery in the corner of the Imperial Garden and began to enjoy the beautiful scenery. Looking at Xiahou Qing's serious expression, Hui Mo thought, "Your Highness, you're not gossipy. You're not gossipy at all." Xiahou Qing seemed to have a pair of ears in his heart. He bent his knuckles and knocked on Hui Mo's forehead again. On the other side of the rockery, Xiao Minglan's lazy and smiley face had a coldness that had never been seen before. Even the mole under her eye was like the tip of a needle or the stinger of a poisonous bee. It was extremely sharp. "How could you agree to this marriage?" he scolded mercilessly. "You know very well that Herue can never marry into the royal family again. You know very well that no one can bear the consequences. You know very well that if that's secret." Xiao Minglan was halfway through her sentence when she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Every word she said was like a stone being thrown at her. "She is your daughter. As her mother, you shouldn't watch her die." There were no ugly people in the Xiao family, and this was especially evident on this pair of siblings. Xiao Mingxue, who was standing in front of him, looked somewhat similar to Xiao Minglan. It was just that there was a hint of gentleness between her brows. She was also slightly older than him. Two graceful, shallow wrinkles appeared at the corners of her exquisitely drawn eyes. However, it could still be seen that she was once a peerless beauty. This beauty who was once a peerless beauty was now a little worried. Her brows were tightly knitted as she refuted, "You're right. I am Herue's mother. How could I harm her? You were there at the scene and saw it with your own eyes. My royal brother insisted on it. I repeatedly refused, but it ended in failure. Under such circumstances, if you were me, what would you do? Defy the imperial edict?" Xiao Minglan sneered and mocked, "So what if I defy the imperial edict? What does it have to do with me whether my royal brother is angry or not? Could it take my life because of this? You didn't refuse because you were intoxicated with power and couldn't extricate yourself. However, have you ever thought that if you can't protect the most important person, what's the use of all the wealth and glory?" Chapter 441. Xiao Mingxue's expression was extremely unsightly. Her delicately manicured nails dug deep into her palms. She shook her head and sneered, "This is the difference between you and I. I have never been able to disregard everything like you. That year, when Imperial Mother died of illness, if I had not licked my face and begged Empress Zhou like a dog, do you think you would have been able to live until now? You are Prince Ku, the youngest prince since the founding of the Great Yu Empire. You are free and unfettered, and you do as you please. However, have you ever thought that this unprecedented 6-year-old prince position was obtained by your older sister by selling her soul? Otherwise, how would you have been able to do so many absurd things in these years? You even pushed away the wedding and focused on raising your actress and courtesan. What right do you have to criticize me wantonly?" After being ruthlessly stabbed, Xiao Minglan's pupils trembled. The veins on the back of his hand popped out from overexertion. Xiao Mingxue also turned her head away. Her expression was extremely unsightly. The siblings fell into a stiff silence until Xiao Mingxue heaved a long sigh and broke the silence. She raised her hand and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. She lowered her voice and said, "I will think of a way to resolve this marriage. I will definitely not harm Herue. Don't worry." Xiao Minglan laughed mockingly. He flicked his sleeves and turned around. "What do I have to worry about? That is your princess residence's matter. What does it have to do with me? I was just bored and meddled in other people's business. You can resolve it however you want. I am tired. I will go to Shattered Red Tower to find my little Hong Yan. Help me say goodbye to Imperial Brother. I will take my leave first." Looking at his resolute back, Xiao Mingxue called out, "Xiaolan, us siblings have not spoken face to face for a long time. Other than this matter, do you have anything else to say to me?" "What is there to say? Why do I not know? Ever since I left the princess residence 15 years ago, we are only related by blood. There is nothing else." Xiao Qing had never heard of such a heartless Xiao Minglan. Behind the rockery, Xiao Qing, who was gently grinding the bones in his palm, continued to listen quietly. Xiao Minglan paused and said, "I was raised by you since I was young. Without you, I might not have been able to live until today. I will remember this kindness. Therefore, I must warn you, don't think about some things that you shouldn't think about. Don't reach for things that you shouldn't touch. Otherwise, you will be caught. You have been smart, so don't seek your own death." After she finished speaking, Xiao Minglan. "Xiaolan. I said, don't call me that." "Sister," she said uncle, but Hurue said Hurto, Hurue said he has not seen his uncle for you for a long time and he. And said to me to said. Her. To said little to herself. Her too. Disgust flashed across Xiao Minglan's eyes. She sneered without turning her head, "That place is too dirty. I am not interested." Xiao Mingxue's face, which even Empress Chao had to give some face to, was now incomparably embarrassed. She leaned against the cold and hard rock of the fake mountain for a long time before hiding the dejection on her face. She put on that invincible mask again and walked out with a smile, once again returning to that extremely luxurious golden jade palace. Xiao Qing and the others, who had accidentally overheard the entire conversation, slowly walked out from behind the rockery. Hui Mo was the first to laugh out loud. "Hey, this is the first time I have seen such a strange relationship between siblings. If you say their relationship is bad, it sounds like they have helped each other in times of need. If you say it is good, it is like they were at odds with each other. TSK. Ah. I understand now. It must be because the eldest princess has been forcing Prince Ke to go on blind dates and angered him. She is like an elder sister in a family, forcing her younger brother to do things he does not like. See, Prince Ke was driven into a corner and rebelled." Jussi glanced at him from the side. "If everyone in this world was like you, there would be less unsolved cases." Hui Mo blinked his eyes and said, "What do you mean? Are you saying that he is simple-minded?" "Your Highness, look at Jussi, look at Jussi." Xiao Qing only says one word, "noisy." He successfully stops Hui Mo's noise. Hui Mo, who was hurt twice, turned his face away sadly and cried silently for himself. Xiao Qing suddenly remembered that Ning Shu had teased him about his outstanding way of raising children. He began to reflect on himself for the first time. It seemed that it was true. It seemed that his future children would have to be taught by her so that they would not go too far. Hui Mo was feeling sorry for himself. Suddenly, he found that His Highness seemed to have thought of something. His face inexplicably softened, like an ice spring that melted invisibly. He was extremely gentle. If those young girls outside were to see him like this, who knows how many of them would go crazy. He was just about to gossip about who His Highness was thinking of when he saw Xiao Qing's ears move slightly. He immediately said, "Quiet, someone is coming." Hui Mo curiously looked out and was startled. "Oh, hey." Chapter 442. It was an extremely ugly face. Among all the living people that Hui Mo had ever seen, she was the ugliest one. Even among all kinds of dead bodies that he had examined, there were not many ugliest ones. She was dressed like an ordinary palace maid, but her face looked like it had been burned in a big fire. Her eyebrows had been burned away, and her mouth was crooked. It was as if there were ferocious worms crawling all over her face. Even her age could not be accurately determined. Only a pair of owl-like eyes swept over. In this kind of floating flowers, shadows and sweet fragrance of the imperial garden, suddenly seeing such a terrifying face, anyone would be so frightened that they would break out in a cold sweat. Seeing Huemo's shocked face, the palace maid immediately lowered her head. "I'm sorry for scaring you. I deserve to die." Judging from her voice, she should be an old maid, but suddenly appeared here quietly, which made people suspicious. Xiahou Qing put one hand behind his back and asked, "Who are you? Why are you here?" The maid bent down in fear. "I'm from Zhao Yin's palace. I came out to find a jade pendant for my mother. If I knew that there were nobles here, I would never dare to come out and offend you." Zhao Yin. Sixth Prince Zhao Yin's cowardly biological mother who had no sense of existence. Xiahou Qing's eyebrows flashed with a trace of playfulness. Huemo knew what she meant and immediately stepped forward. "You said that you're from Zhao Yin's palace, right? Who knows if you're talking nonsense or not?" "I'm not talking nonsense." The maid was trembling with fear and was about to kneel down, when a lake green palace dress floated from near to far. "Shu Shui, haven't you found it yet? It's just a jade pendant. You've been here for a long time and still haven't found it. What's the use of you?" "Ah, it's Xiahou. I was blind and didn't see you. Please forgive me." It was Yin Zhaoyi. Her voice was originally slightly anxious, but when she recognized Xiahou Qing, she immediately changed her expression. She glanced at Shu Shui, who didn't even dare to raise her head, and roughly guessed the whole story. She sighed and said, "This Shu Shui is indeed mine. I was taking a walk in the imperial garden and accidentally lost a bracelet. I didn't think that she would come to find it. Later, I thought that His Majesty was holding a banquet in Weiyang Palace today. At this moment, there should be no one here, and it wouldn't scare others, so I sent her. I didn't expect that she would bump into you. It was my negligence." She was different from Empress Chao's noble and graceful, and was also completely different from Qi Fian's overbearing aura. Yin Zhaoyi, who was a few years younger than Empress Chao, used her whole body to write a big word, worry. She was like a rootless butterfly orchid, afraid that she would fall down when the wind blew gently. Xiahou Qing's face was warm, and he also politely said, "Zhaoyi, you're too polite. It's just that I can't see, so it's not considered a collision. It's my servant who was young and reckless and lost his decorum. Huemo, hurry up and confess your sins." Huemo heard the string and quickly understood his meaning. He went forward to salute Yin Zhaoyi embarrassedly, scratched his head and said, "I pay my respects to Zhaoyi. I made a fuss about nothing and was rude. Please punish me. However, I'm really curious. What kind of disaster did this maid go through to become like this?" Yin Zhaoyi's twinkling eyes seemed to be filled with a layer of water vapor that rippled like smoke. She couldn't help but sigh. This matter started 25 years ago. That year, Empress Zhou suddenly went crazy for some reason. She raised her sword and killed the previous crown prince. Blood dyed the Phoenix Algae Palace, and then she burned the entire palace. That fire was too big, spreading to palace after palace. The palace servants' howls resounded throughout the entire palace. Even after 20 years, I still can't forget those miserable cries. At that time, I hadn't been appointed as an imperial concubine by His Majesty and was still working in the Shang Palace Bureau. Because the Shang Palace Bureau I was in was very close to the Phoenix Algae Palace, I wasn't spared. At that time, my life was at stake. I saw palace maids dying one after another in front of me. I thought my life was going to end here. It was Shu Shui who braved the raging fire at a young age and dragged me out. After I was rescued, I found that my arms and back were burned, but my life was not in danger. However, because she was hit by a broken piece of wood, her entire face was destroyed and could never recover. Yin Zhaoyi's voice was slightly choked, so Xu Shui saved my life. Although I know that palace maids with disfigured faces shouldn't be kept in the palace, I still insisted on keeping her. Once she was driven out, there was no way she could survive. He didn't expect that there was such a reason. Hui Mo was surprised and ashamed. He clenched his fist and bowed deeply. I didn't expect Mama to be such a righteous person. I was rude and offended Mama. Mama, please forgive me. The misunderstanding was over. Yin Zhaoyi said a few more polite words and left with Xu Shui. When their figures completely disappeared, Hui Mo's expression changed. He immediately jumped back and said mysteriously, "Your Highness, I feel that there is something wrong with Yin Zhaoyi." Chapter 443. Xiahou Qing extended his arm and walked unhurriedly with Juxi's support on the pebbled flower path. He wanted to hear more. What's the problem? Hui Mo wanted to express himself. Look, they said they were here to look for Huan Pei, but they left before they found it. Isn't that strange? Xiahou Qing nodded. Is there anything else? Continue. There's more. There's something wrong with that nanny too. I clearly remember when we walked out from behind the rockery and found her. When I first saw her, her gaze was very strange. She stared at me like an owl and there was no expression on her face. It was like a puppet made by the craftsman to exorcise ghosts. In the blink of an eye, she quickly changed her expression. She bowed in fear and trepidation and begged for mercy. The difference between before and after was too big. Moreover, her movements were so light that Juxi and I didn't notice. Fortunately, you have excellent hearing and caught it quickly. Otherwise, who knows what she heard. Lastly, there's one more thing. We just started to interrogate this nanny and Yin Zhaoyi rushed over. This timing is too coincidental and timely. If this isn't a problem, then what is? I'm starting to suspect that she was sent by Yin Zhaoyi to eavesdrop. It seems that this weak and timid Yin Zhaoyi, who has never had a sense of existence, is very suspicious. Xiahou Qing said lightly, not only her, the people we met today were all very strange, weren't they? Princess Royal Xiao Mingxue, Prince Ku, Xiao Minglan, and this seemingly harmless Yin Zhaoyi. The people they suspected were all gathered at the same place on the same day. How could they not be surprised? With strong doubts, they returned to Weiyang Palace. Xiao Minglan's seat was indeed empty. Princess Royal continued to accompany His Majesty and Chao Ho to chat. Perhaps no one would have guessed that not long ago, her face was filled with embarrassment and fragility. One would become addicted to wearing a fake face for a long time. Unknowingly, the fake face would blend into one's skin and flesh, completely replacing the real one. This woman enjoyed the most unique respect and irreplaceable position in the imperial family. Even the empress respected her. Her husband was also the most famous Tanhua in the past. They had been deeply in love for many years. It seemed to be a perfect life, but who could guess how many lice were hidden under the beautiful clothes? According to the original plan, when the banquet was nearing its end, Princess Chomping's servant girl would appear in a panic and report the bad news that the princess had contracted smallpox. But when the time came, there was no news. Even Southern Yan's diplomatic mission had asked His Majesty to leave. Xiahou Qing frowned and said to Hui Mo in a low voice, "Go and ask him what happened." Hui Mo received the order and glanced around. When no one was looking, he quietly left the banquet. After half an incense stick's time, he came back and leaned over to Xiahou Qing's ear and said, "When I left, I met Princess Chongping who sent a message saying that she had changed her mind. She thought about it all night and suddenly understood that since she had enjoyed the honor of being the imperial princess for 15 years, she should bear the corresponding responsibility. For the safety of the people and the stability of Great Yu, she had no reason to run away. Otherwise, she would live in self-blame for the rest of her life. So she decided to cancel the original plan. Xiahou Qing's eyebrows seemed to be pricked by a needle. A bad premonition arose and drilled into his heart, causing him to feel pain from the inside out. He clutched his chest and said, "Then what about Ning Shu? Where is she?" Hui Mo said, "The princess said that Lady Ning was very tired these days, so she left the palace early to rest. She asked you not to worry." It was reasonable to say that the unruly little princess suddenly understood righteousness. In fact, it wasn't a bad thing. Moreover, it saved them a lot of trouble and they didn't have to offend her anymore. But he didn't know why, but his master's face suddenly changed. He stood up and said, "Something might have happened to her. Immediately go and stop Xiao Chongping." Chapter 444. Hui Mo hurriedly chased after him and supported him. He didn't understand and asked, "Why do you say that?" Xiahou Qing's voice was extremely tense. She has never been a delicate woman. Things are not over yet and there is always the possibility of changes. She would never leave early because she is tired. This is one of the reasons. She entered the palace before the time was up. Even if Princess Chongping decided to cancel the banquet, she shouldn't have sent the news so late. It is also impossible for her to leave the palace before she finished communicating with us. This is the second reason. The third reason, what is the third reason? Xiahou Qing raised his head, his face as cold as ice, my premonition. His heart was in great pain. There was no reason, but a premonition was telling him that something had happened to her. If he didn't immediately rush over to stop him, then he would regret it. Hui Mo didn't say anything else and immediately supported him out of the hole. Just as they reached the palace gates, they were suddenly stopped by a figure. It was the fourth prince, Xiao Yunsu. Hui Mo saw his malicious expression and knew that he was here to cause trouble. However, there was an important matter at hand and he didn't have time to waste on this person. Thus, he politely said, "Fourth prince, my family's Shitzi has an important matter and has to leave first. Your Highness, please move." "Move?" Xiao Yunsu sneered, his gaze sweeping over them. "Today's banquet is hosted by my father, but Xia Ho Shitzi has repeatedly left the banquet. Do you think the imperial palace is your Nanping mansion's territory? You don't put the emperor in your eyes." Without Xiao Minglan stopping him, Xiao Yunsu was like a dog that had broken free from its chain. He started to bark crazily and wanted to tear Xiahou Qing to shreds before he stopped. The officials who were leaning against the palace gate all turned their gazes over. If it was any other time, Xiahou Qing wouldn't have the leisure to argue with a mad dog. He would just endure and laugh. However, at this time, he didn't have the mood or the patience to endure. "Please move." His voice was like cold jade. This was the first time he showed his strength in front of Xiao Yunsu. Xiao Yunsu was taken aback at first, then he sneered. He lowered his chin, and his eyes looked as if they had been dipped in poison. He curled his lips and revealed his canine teeth. He deliberately provoked, "What if this prince doesn't give in today? Do you want to kill me in this Weiyang palace in front of my father?" Xiahou Qing also smiled. It was extremely light, like a gust of wind that carelessly blew across the surface of the water, causing slight ripples. He retracted his hand from Hui Mo and took a step forward, approaching Xiao Yunsu. Xiao Yunsu clearly knew that his eyes could no longer see, but for some reason, when he stared at the black cloth in front of his eyes, he suddenly felt a chill from the depths of his bones that could not be ignored. It was as if someone was stabbing him in the back with a dagger. As long as there was a little bit more force, he would be cut open and die. He heard Xiahou Qing say softly in front of him, "Fourth Prince, do you think your life is important? Even if I really kill you in this Weiyang Palace, what will happen?" You. Xiao Yunsu did not think that he would dare to reveal his killing intent so openly. He was immediately stunned. However, Xiahou Qing took a step forward, forcing him back. His voice was deeper and colder than before, like a ruthless bell ringing in Xiao Yunsu's head, deafening even the apathetic. My Nanping Palace has existed for more than 200 years, as long as the Great Yu. Every new emperor has thought of razing Nanping Palace to the ground, but none have succeeded. What do you think the reason is? My Nanping Palace is the gate to the Great Yu. If the palace is defeated, the gate will be broken. Especially now that Southern Yen is coming with a menacing momentum, the situation is precarious, and war could erupt at any time. Fourth Prince, you think that a dispensable prince who can be replaced at any time or an important gate to the Great Yu? Which is more important in His Majesty's eyes? Moreover, your mother has already lost her mind, and there is no chance of her returning to favor. The Qi family is like a monkey with a broken arm, unable to support you. Under these circumstances, even if I really kill you, what harm will it do to me? Chapter 445. Under such a merciless voice, Xiao Yunsu's lips turned white and he couldn't help but clutch his chest. His whole body broke out in a cold sweat. Xiahou Qing continued to speak, each word was like a block of ice being thrown at Xiao Yunsu. I don't know where your enmity towards me comes from, and I don't know who instigated you to target me. If you're worried about your throne, then that's ridiculous. The things that you regard as treasures might be worthless in my eyes. No matter who sits on the throne in the future, they will have nothing to do with me, Xiahou Qing. I have no intention of participating in the battle between you two, but if you insist on seeking your own death, then I, Xiahou Qing, will do as you wish. In addition, I'll give your highness one last piece of advice: a puppet in the hands of others will never be able to stand at the highest position. You will only become a pool of rotten blood for that position. I hope your highness will take this as a warning. As Xiahou Qing's last word fell, Xiao Yunsu's entire body shuddered. His feet had nowhere to retreat, and he tripped heavily on the doorstep. He almost fell down, but Xiahou Qing grabbed him by the collar. Xiahou Qing smiled faintly, and he'd already recovered his usual carefree and immortal appearance. It was as if the person from before who had sharp claws like an eagle wasn't him at all. He said, "The fourth prince can't stand and can't stand properly. Hui Mo, hurry and help the fourth prince back to the banquet table to rest." Yes. Hui Mo's heart was overjoyed. He skipped over to help Xiao Yunsu up. "Fourth prince, please. This time you must stand firm and don't fall again. Otherwise, my family's young master won't be able to pull you up again. Fourth prince, do you understand?" Xiao Yunsu stiffly raised his head and saw a large drop of cold sweat dripping from his forehead to the ground. He also saw that after Xiahou Qing finished speaking, he didn't stop for a moment. With Jiu Si's help, he brushed his clothes aside and stepped over the threshold. He suddenly realized that he had actually felt great fear towards Xiahou Qing earlier. This kind of fear would only occur when facing his father's anger. He was so scared that his entire body trembled. He almost wanted to prostrate himself and beg for mercy. If it was in front of his imperial father, then it would be fine. That was his imperial father, the supreme ruler of the 9 regions. But this person was Xiahou Qing, a small prince of Nanping. He was a lackey of the Shao family. And who was he? The Great Yu's imperial eldest prince with the noblest bloodline. Preposterous. After a short pause, Xiao Yunsu's chest was suddenly filled with anger. It burned uncontrollably. This anger made him push Mo away and pull out the saber on the waist of the guard beside him. He threw it towards Xiao Qing's back. Go to hell. Xiao Qing, die for me. Mo said in alarm, Prince, be careful. Jiu Si immediately stopped and turned around to block. Xiao Qing opened his mouth and said indifferently, no need. He ordered Jiu Si to step back and stand to the side. Then his ears moved slightly. He spun around and grabbed the sword in his hand. Xiao Yunyi, Xiao Yunsen, and the others who heard the news looked at him in shock. With a shake of his arm, the sword broke into 2 pieces and fell to the ground. He said, my eyes are blind, but my ears are not blind. My heart is not blind. If there is a next time, you can use the same sword. Xiao Yunsu turned his neck in fear and met his imperial father's furious eyes. He watched as his imperial father reached out and scolded him, bastard. Chapter 446. Xiao Qing threw down the broken knife, turned around and left, leaving the dispute behind. Mo glanced at Xiao Yunsu and gave him a pitiful glance. TSK, I've never seen someone so eager to die. If it was any other time, my family's Shiziyi might not have the time to bother with you. But you chose to rush out at the critical moment when Miss Ning is in trouble. You're a dog that blocks the road. This time you're done for. Sure enough, His Majesty slapped Xiao Yunsu in anger. Xiao Yunsu only realized what he had done after blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. But it was too late. His brain buzzed and he quickly begged for mercy. Father, I was wrong. Recently, Lady Mother is seriously ill and her condition is getting worse. I was so anxious that I lost my mind and offended Xiao Shizi. I know I was wrong. Please spare your son this once. Xiao Shizi, you're a magnanimous person. Please ask Father for mercy for me. But Xiao Qing turned a deaf ear to him. That calm and straight figure quickly disappeared at the end of the palace road. Xiao Yunsu finally understood. When Xiao Qing gave him face, it was called face. If he didn't, then he, the 4th prince, was nothing in Xiao Qing's eyes. Mo walked around Xiao Yunsu who was immersed in resentment and quickly followed Xiao Shizi and Juxi's footsteps. He originally wanted to ask why they had been hiding their strength for so many years. They had portrayed Xiao Shizi as a weak and sickly person. But today, in front of His Majesty, under the gaze of so many people in Weiyang Palace, they were completely exposed. Wasn't this too careless? But when he looked up and saw Xiao Shizi's tense face, he suddenly had the answer. So he closed his mouth and bowed. Xiao Shizi, I'll go to the palace gate and ask the guards if Lady Ning's carriage has left the palace. After getting Xiao Qing's approval, Mo rushed towards the palace gate. Xiao Zhangping's palace was located in the most remote southwest corner of the imperial palace. Most of the people who lived here were imperial concubines who were not favored or had long been forgotten in the cold palace. As a result, this area seemed particularly cold and cheerless in the majestic imperial palace. However, today, there was a rare festive atmosphere nearby. Even the trees along the path were wrapped in a layer of red brocade. This was because today was the day that 13th Princess Xiao Zhangping was going to the southern Yan kingdom as a diplomatic envoy for the peace marriage. By the time Xiao Qing arrived, Xiao Zhangping had already changed into a set of red robes and was sitting in his bedroom with a veil over his head. He was waiting for the southern Yan kingdom's diplomatic team to arrive so that he could receive the palanquin and leave the palace. Henceforth, it would be difficult for his soul to return from 1,000 li away. When she heard the palace servant report that Xiahou Qing had forced his way in, Xiao Zhangping's eyes flashed. She immediately lifted her veil and ran towards him. She said, "Xiahou Shizi, are you here to say goodbye to me?" Her eyes were full of anticipation and she couldn't help herself. However, she didn't expect that Xiahou Qing's first words would be a cold and forceful question, "Where's Ning Shu?" The anticipation in her eyes shattered into pieces and fell to the ground. Xiao Zhangping's heart ached. She laughed at herself and said, "I thought that you would at least be a little reluctant to part with me and come to see me one last time before saying a few final words to me. I didn't expect that the first thing you asked about was Ning Shu. Xiahou Shizi, it seems like you really don't care about me at all." The light of the summer poured down on his entire body, causing him to be covered in a layer of light. He was as beautiful as a deity. Under this layer of light, he heard the chirping of cicadas in the trees. He couldn't help but lean his ear to listen carefully. He said, "Princess Zhangping, all these years, I've always regarded you as a close friend and younger sister. This is because I always remember that when I first lost my sense of smell and was being teased, it was you who stood out and knocked over the bowl of sweet soup in front of me." Chapter 447. Xiao Zhangping's thoughts floated in the dust of light. His eyes were absent-minded as he slowly returned to the past. "Are you talking about that matter? I didn't expect the heir to still remember." It seemed to be the first time the heir apparent entered the palace. In the throne room, he wrote a policy debate that shook the entire Shumi courtyard. In order to repel the Xiongnu, he set up a heroic deed. In an instant, the young man's heroic name spread throughout the palace. But I was only 4 years old at the time. I didn't have the wit to understand the heir's contributions because I was busy stealing things. I was probably the only princess who often stole food from the imperial kitchen. Because I ate simple tea and plain food every day, I was often hungry. So I often lingered around the imperial kitchen, looking for opportunities to sneak in and take some pastries back to share with my mother. It was the same at that time. But just as I was about to sneak in, I saw fourth imperial brother sneak in with a few other young masters. He secretly put a filthy animal part in the sweet soup that His Majesty gave you. He said something like, "You were in the limelight in the throne room, but you're just a piece of trash who doesn't even have a sense of smell. This prince wants to see how you can show off after eating this filthy thing." I thought I heard something incredible and was extremely scared. So I hid far away. But I don't know why, but my great curiosity drove me to quietly follow them. I wanted to see what would happen. Then I saw the palace servants bring the bowl of soup to the heir. Then I saw you. A girl's mind couldn't be enlightened. Sometimes when she saw someone, she would remember that person for the rest of her life. A 4-year-old's glance was like a seed. She suddenly had an epiphany on her first night. In an instant, it grew and sprouted into a flower. Xiahou Qing's voice was like the wind. "So no matter how many outrageous requests you made, I could laugh them off and even try to satisfy you. However, there was one thing you shouldn't touch, and you can't touch. You're talking about her, Ning Shu." The distant past was like a colorful bubble that was pierced by a single sentence. It made Xiao Zhangping's chest constrict. She was so angry that she couldn't speak. A lot of unwillingness hit her like a huge wave, completely messing up her reason. She had a lot of questions. She wanted to ask, "I was the one who met you first. We were the ones who were tied together first. Why did you choose her instead of me? I want to ask, what's so good about Ning Shu and what's so bad about me? If I change, will you consider me a little?" She wanted to ask, "You're so determined to have her, but what if you don't have her? If she never existed in this world, then what are you going to do? If she wasn't there, even if she was there, wouldn't it be better to just make her disappear?" Then make her disappear. Make her disappear completely. The world's most viscous darkness was born from the bottom of his heart. There was no trace of it, but it had already silently occupied his entire body. The last bit of guilt was completely suppressed. She took a deep breath, raised her head, and changed her expression to one of calmness. She said, "Your Highness misunderstood. Ning Shu is not with me." After she entered the palace, I told her my thoughts after a night of deep thought. I did not intend to run away from the marriage. She respected my thoughts very much, so she left the palace first. I already sent a palace servant to report this matter to you. Could it be that the palace servant didn't pass on the message? Hong Fei, how did you do things? You dared to gloss over such an important matter. Be careful of this princess punishment. Hong Fei immediately knelt down and said, "Princess, please calm down. This servant has already passed on the message to your Highness bodyguard. This servant really didn't neglect it." Oh. Then where did it go wrong? Xiao Zhangping was surprised and looked at Xiaoqing. Could it be that the bodyguard forgot to pass on the message to your Highness, causing this misunderstanding? Chapter 448. Her expression was blank and sincere. It didn't seem fake at all. Xiaoqing said, "Princess Changping, I don't have time to play this kind of childish game with you. Tell me, where is Ning Shu?" Xiao Zhangping let out a sigh. "It seems that the heir doesn't believe me. In that case, you can go to the palace gates and ask to see if I'm lying." As soon as Xiao Zhangping's voice fell, Hui Mo hurriedly rushed over. He didn't even have time to wipe the sweat off his forehead before he said, "Master, I just asked the palace guards. They said that Lady Ning's carriage did indeed leave the palace 2 hours ago. When they checked the real body, they saw that it was Lady Ning's real body." Xiao Zhangping clenched her fists and pulled up the corners of her lips. "Now the heir should believe me. Of course, if you still don't believe me, I'll let you search the entire palace. If you can find Ning Shu in my palace, I, Xiao Zhangping, will give you my head as compensation." She turned sideways and ordered the palace guards to leave. She directly made way for Xiaoqing. This kind of magnanimous and fearless attitude made Hui Mo somewhat unsure. He whispered, "Heir, could it be that you're thinking too much and misunderstanding? Perhaps things are as simple as Princess Changping said." Lady Ning felt that the matter was over. Last night, she was tired from running around and didn't sleep well. She thought that Princess Changping would send someone to report, so there was no need for her to make another trip and left first. If they really searched and didn't find anything, the scene would be awkward. Xiaoqing didn't care at all and said in a deep voice, "Jussi, search." Hey. Jussi's actions were very strong. Before Hui Mo could react, he had already walked into the hall with a wooden face. He carefully searched inch by inch, even under the bed. Hui Mo turned his head to look at Xiao Zhangping. Her face was covered with a veil, only revealing a pair of eyes. Her face revealed a deep sadness, as if she was hurt from head to toe. Under the contrast of her red wedding dress, she looked even more sorrowful. For some reason, Hui Mo's mind was in a mess. A moment later, Jiu Si walked out and shook his head. "Young master, we didn't find him." Xiaoqing frowned. He was puzzled and doubtful. However, it was an indisputable fact that he couldn't find it. Judging from the current evidence, he might have really wronged Xiao Zhangping, but why was the feeling of suffocation in his chest still lingering? "Ning Shu, nothing must happen to you." Filled with worry, Xiaoqing clasped his hands and bowed solemnly. "Princess Changping, I have offended you. I will personally pay you a visit one day to apologize." Looking at his travel-worn back, Xiao Zhangping grinned and muttered to himself, it seems like you really put her at the top of your heart. Have you forgotten that I'm about to leave this place forever? How can there be another day? A teardrop fell from Xiao Zhangping's eyes. Exhausted, Xiao Zhangping squatted on the ground and covered her cheeks, letting the big drops of tears wet her fingers. Seeing her tears, Hui Mo hurriedly took out a brand new handkerchief and hurriedly bent down to hand it over. Don't cry anymore. I don't know what to do when you cry. You still have cowpox on your body. It's not good for you to cry. Take good care of yourself in the future. Xiao Zhangping angrily slapped the handkerchief, which had a faint fragrance of green bamboo, onto the ground. Chapter 449. After leaving the palace, Hui Mo rushed to the house of Duke without stopping. He didn't care about etiquette and flew up a tree to summon Forsythia. He asked anxiously, "Little Forsythia, where is your lady? Is she in the house?" Forsythia frowned. "She's not here. When she went out this morning, she said that she had something important to do in the palace. She was afraid that she would be delayed for a while. She asked me to cover for her in front of the madam." She suddenly became nervous. "What's wrong? Did something happen to her?" Hui Mo's heart thumped, but he pretended to be relaxed. "Don't think too much. It's just that my Shitzi is looking for her for an urgent matter. He couldn't find her for a while. You stay in the house of Duke. When your lady comes back, immediately send someone to inform her. I'll go first." Leaving the house of Duke, Hui Mo mounted his horse and rushed to the place where they had agreed to meet. Just as he reported the news to Xiahou Qing, he saw Tianwen sweating profusely as he tightened his grip on the reins and stopped the horse. Xiahou Qing listened carefully and immediately said, "Tianwen, what's the result of the investigation?" Tianwen didn't talk much nonsense and directly said, "Some passers-by saw Lady Ning's carriage leaving the palace gate. It went through Xuanwu Street and went out of the city. The last person who saw the carriage was at a tea house 3 miles away from the city gate. As the sun gradually rose, the owner of the tea house was busy selling tea. As soon as he looked up, he saw a magnificent carriage slowly stop. He heard the young lady inside say that she was thirsty and asked a maid to buy a cup of tea. After drinking, the carriage continued to go west. After that, no one saw it again. Why did Lady Ning go to the western suburbs? Go all the way to the west, the meaning is not." Hui Mo almost blurted out the word auspicious. Hui Mo quickly slapped his own mouth and spat twice. He stood aside obediently and waited for his master's order. He did not want to talk nonsense. Xiahou Qing's usually calm and collected face was now extremely tense. He stretched out his hand and said, "Give me the horsewhip." "Ah!" Hui Mo was stunned. He hurriedly advised, "You forgot that you can't see. It's too dangerous to ride the horse. Let's get on the carriage. I'll use all my strength to ride the horse. I must make the carriage run faster." But Xiahou Qing said, "The carriage is too slow, I can't wait. Tianwen and Shi Yan will lead the way. Huema and Jusi will follow behind me. Don't worry, I'm not deaf. I won't let anything happen to me. There's no time to lose. Give me the horsewhip now." Since he was so insistent, the others had no choice but to follow his orders. Therefore, the group of people rode their horses out of the city at the fastest speed and headed west. The overly bright summer sun enveloped his entire body, causing his forehead to drip with sweat. His jade-colored face revealed an unusual paleness, but he did not make a sound. He bent his body and urged his horse forward, listening attentively. He was like a mountain in the wind. The 2-hour journey was shortened by half by them. When they arrived at the tea house, they asked the owner of the tea house a few more questions. The carriage style and carvings were the same as the one in the house of Marquis. It should be the carriage that Ning Shu rode. I just asked the owner of the tea house. If we continue to head west, there will be a fork in the road. What should we do, Prince? Should we divide into 3 groups and continue to chase? Hui Mo was in a dilemma. It was not impossible to divide into 3 groups, but the problem was, what if they encountered another fork in the road ahead? Lady Ning's carriage was faster than them by 2 hours. If they continued to chase like this, no matter how many people they had, they would not be enough. On the horseback, Xiahou Qing suppressed a burst of coughing in his chest and said in a deep voice, "Look at the total number of ruts on the ground." After hearing Xiahou Qing's words, Hui Mo immediately thought about it. He and Tianwen got off the horse and bent down to check carefully. There are a total of 14 ruts that can be seen clearly. They belong to 7 carriages. Among them, 3 pairs of ruts are surprisingly in the same direction. They should belong to the same group of carriages. These 3 pairs can be ruled out. Among the remaining 4 pairs of ruts, 2 pairs are relatively clear. They should belong to carriages that just passed by. They can also be ruled out. This pair of ruts is very deep. They have eaten into the soil. This kind of situation is usually left by a carriage carrying something heavy. There were only 3 people in Miss Ning's carriage, and they were all slender girls. Logically speaking, they shouldn't have left such a deep mark. The other half of the mark must have been left by the horse. Prince, let's follow it. Without further ado, they continued to get on the horse. Not long after, they suddenly smelled a pungent smell of gunpowder in front of them. Along with the hot wind, they could not help but sneeze. Jiu Si was very careful. He immediately reined in the horse and said, "Prince, this smell is not right. I am afraid there is danger in front. Please wait here for a while. I will go to the front to inquire about the situation. I will be back soon. Go." Tianwen had sharp ears and eyes. He was the best at inquiring about information. He also said, "I will go with you." The 2 winged cavalry immediately rushed away. Hui Ma and Shi Yan stayed at Xiahou Qing, waiting for news. However, they did not expect that after waiting for a long time, they did not see anyone return. They could not help but feel anxious. Just as they were thinking about whether to send someone to check, they came back. Jiu Si's expression was very strange. Tianwen had always been jumpy, but it was the first time that Hui Ma had seen such a strange expression on Jiu Si's face. It was as if he had just witnessed something very strange. It was extremely terrible. It was as if he could not bear to say it. Xiahou Qing frowned. Hui Ma was very anxious. "Hey, why are you guys making such a strange expression? What happened in front of us? Tell me quickly." Jiu Si and Tianwen looked at each other. It was as if they had made a very difficult decision in a short time. Finally, Jiu Si whispered, "There is a firecracker workshop in front of us." It exploded. Shi Yan asked, "Isn't it common for firecracker workshops to explode? There are many of them every year. What happened? Could it be that someone was injured by the explosion?" Jiu Si looked at Xiahou Qing hesitantly and said slowly, "The passers-by said that they saw a carriage passing by when the explosion happened. The people inside and the carriage were blown to pieces. And the style of the carriage. Shitzi." Xiahou Qing's hand missed and he immediately fell from the horse. Jiu Si was already prepared and immediately jumped over to support him. However, he saw that Xiahou Qing's throat rolled and suddenly a mouthful of blood slipped out from his mouth. "This is... Hui Mo, where is the medicine? Quickly bring it." Xiahou Qing stretched out his hand to stop him. He raised his hand and wiped the blood off his mouth. He hissed word by word, "No. Need. Take. I don't believe it's her. Help me. Get on the horse. Sit. I want to see. Chapter 450. In front of him was a smell so strong that it made one's scalp tingle. The pungent smell of gunpowder, charcoal, and the stench of human flesh and blood being torn apart mixed together in the hot and humid air. It was tyrannical and cruel, stinging enough to make one want to vomit. Weeping, fear, lamenting, and wailing filled his ears. They were like knives that pierced his eardrums, stabbing into the softest and most painful parts of his body, causing his internal organs to turn into a mess and blood to flow like a river. Xiaoqing dismounted from the horse's back. With a pale face and an indifferent expression, he passed through the mournful crowd that had lost their family members and friends in the explosion. Under Jussi's guidance, he stopped in front of the wreckage of the carriage that had been shattered into several pieces. In the summer breeze, the black brocade in front of him fluttered behind him, making his face even paler. Only his lips were bright red. He asked, "Where is she?" Even someone as calm and indifferent as Jussi found it difficult to summon up the courage to look around again. The firecracker workshop was still burning. The raging flames emitted black smoke into the sky, obscuring the image of the bright sun. An artisan desperately trying to escape from the workshop did not receive the blessings of the god of fate. He was blown to pieces at the door, and the delicate body of the young girl could not withstand a single blow. The broken axle scattered the remains of flesh everywhere. There was only a broken hairpin embedded in the pitch-black pothole. The pattern of the hairpin was vivid and lifelike, and half of it was cracked. He said with difficulty, "It's gone. It's all in pieces." Xiaoqing immediately curled his lips into a sneer and said coldly, "It's all in pieces. How can you prove it's her? You've been by my side for many years. Can't you tell it's just a smokescreen? How can you believe it so easily? Jussi, let's go home." Jussi said again. A broken golden hairpin was found on the ground. "It looks like the one Lady Ning usually wears." The sneer on Xiaoqing's face deepened, and his voice became hoarser. "Anyone can imitate a golden hairpin. It's also possible that she accidentally lost it or stole it. This scheme is so clumsy. You want me to believe that the dead person is her based on a golden hairpin? Ridiculous." Heaven's Inquisition, who had been squatting at the crime scene and carefully searching, suddenly found something in the broken palm that was still intact. He hurriedly called out, "There's something in this palm, quickly help me dig it out." Hui Mo answered and took out the thing with the help of the dissecting knife. After wiping off the ashes and skin fragments, he was stunned. A strong sour smell rushed to the tip of his nose, and his eyes turned red on the spot. With trembling hands, he slowly placed the hot object into Xiaoqing's palm. It was a piece of suet white jade of excellent quality. It had been carved into the shape of a swimming fish by the hands of a master. It felt smooth to the touch. On his 16th birthday, his father had carefully selected it as a birthday gift for him. It meant that the fish had a shallow bottom and was free to become a dragon. He was very fond of it, so he had carried it with him for many years, until that unexpected night 4 months ago, when he met a cunning woman who was as cunning as a fox, and then she took him away. Xiaoqing slightly curved his lips and smiled, like a fish gently kissing the water. "Oh, I didn't expect that she had been wearing it all this time. I don't know when she started to have ideas about this Shitsi." Then his heart was torn, and he spat out another mouthful of blood from his throat. He stiffly fell to the back. Shitsi. Chapter 451. She heard the sound of people weeping. There were many, many, densely intertwined together, surrounding a coffin and crying loudly. She saw many tears rolling down from the eyes, dripping into the soil in front of the coffin, dripping onto the cheeks and lapels of many people. One of the owners of the lapels clung to the coffin with both hands, looking at the pieces of charred corpses inside. He cried until his whole body convulsed and fainted several times. My my one and only precious daughter. She clearly still looked charming and gentle, but for some reason, there was a strand of white hair growing out of her temples. Next to her was a 4 or 5-year-old child, looking white and soft, with a pair of big round eyes shining with huge tears. He tried his best to reach out his small hand to comfort his grieving mother, but he couldn't help but throw himself in front of the coffin, waving his short arms to prevent the craftsman from closing the coffin lid. Get out of the way, don't touch my sister, don't lock my sister in there alone. Woo-woo. Sister, sister. A man in his 40s, wearing a high hat and a wide belt, also stood there with a face full of pain, holding his throwing tantrums in his arms, but when he saw the miserable state of his beloved daughter again, his footsteps became weak and he almost stumbled and fell, with tears streaming down his face. A round-faced person, who looked very soft and good-tempered, came forward to support him and comfort him, but when he turned his head, his eyes were also red. There was another person, standing under the camphor wood 10 zhang away, looking in the direction of the coffin in the distance. This person was very strange. It was clearly a hot summer day, but he was wearing a dark robe, with a brocade of the same color in front of his eyes, fluttering behind him even though there was no wind. She thought that this person must be a weirdo, dressed like this. Wasn't he afraid of dying from the heat? However, this person had a good appearance. Although she couldn't see his eyes, the other parts of his body that were exposed could be regarded as the best in the world. His eyebrows were picturesque, his nose was like a heavenly carving, and his lips were especially beautiful. If they were a bit thicker, it would be too much, and if they were a bit thinner, it would appear fickle. Just like this, neither thick nor thin, it was just right. The tip of his lip slightly curved, making people unable to help but feel restless. If there was a drop of wine on the tip of his lips, then he would truly be the most beautiful woman in the world. It was a pity that the color of his lips was abnormally pale, as if he was suffering from some serious illness. Even the rest of his skin was extremely white, like a ball of snow. She thought to herself that she couldn't do that. The sunlight was so glaring. If she accidentally melted under the sun, it would be such a pity for the human world. Look, a part of the black brocade in front of him had already melted under the sun. Otherwise, how could it show the dark color of being soaked in water? She couldn't help but float closer to that person. After listening to him being silent for a long time, he gently moved his thin lips and smiled bleakly. I thought highly of myself for 21 years, but in the end, I couldn't even protect the person I loved. I've really made my life a complete joke. She didn't know why, but this sentence was like a knife, gouging out the part of her heart that was constantly beating. She forcefully threw it to the ground. The ground was covered in blood, and she was in so much pain that she couldn't stand up. The countless cries all around were like countless whips, whipping her until the tip of her nose was sore. Her internal organs were in so much pain that they were twitching. She couldn't help but reach out her hands, wanting to grab those people's arms and wipe their tears, telling them to stop crying. So she reached out her hands and forcefully grabbed. "Fourth young miss, you're awake." An unfamiliar voice suddenly reached her ears and grabbed her hands, pulling her back from the distant illusory realm. Ning Shu immediately opened her eyes. Chapter 452. In front of her was the roof of a carriage. Her 4 limbs felt the even vibration of the carriage wheels, which told her that her estimation was correct. This was a carriage that wasn't too big, nor was it conspicuous. Only 2 or 3 people could sit inside. She was lying in the arms of a young girl. The young girl was quite young. Her hair was combed into 2 buns like a servant girl. Her eyes weren't big and she had an oval face. She was lying down, so the young girl could only kneel down. Although the carriage wasn't big, the decorations could be considered neat. There were cushions for shock, a small couch for resting, and the carved patterns on the inner walls showed an exotic style. However, her head hurt so much that it felt like it was about to split open. Her mind was groggy, full yet empty. All her memories seemed to have been forcefully trapped, piled up, and stuffed into a corner. They seemed to be there, but she just couldn't recall them. She could only forcefully press her temples, barely suppressing the pain. After briefly observing the surrounding situation, Ning Shu said with a hoarse voice, "What did you call me?" The servant girl said without hesitation, "Fourth young Mississippi." Who else could it be? "Ah, fourth young miss, you couldn't have hit your head that time, right?" The doctor clearly said it wasn't a big deal. That doctor must be a quack. Ning Shu wrinkled her brows and pressed her fingers on her temples. "I hit my head before. My head hurts so much that I can't remember anything. Can you tell me what exactly happened?" The servant girl sighed, "AI. This is a long story. My family's master, that is, young Mrs. Father, is a silk merchant in southern Yen. His family's wealth is very good. Although it can be said that his wealth is comparable to a country, buying 3 to 5 cities is not an exaggeration. You are the manor's 4th young Mississippi madam has been waiting for you for many years. She gave birth to you through a difficult labor and raised you like a pearl in the palm of her hand. But when you were 3 years old, Master and Madam took you to the Lantern Festival to play and admire the lanterns. You played very happily. However, there was an accident. A lion dance team suddenly rushed out and separated you from Master and Madam. Master and Madam desperately tried to pass through the lion dance team, but you had already disappeared. Master and Madam searched the entire city but couldn't find you. Later, they found out that the lion dance troupe was a group of human traffickers. They would come out on festive days to create chaos and steal other people's children. They would then abduct and sell them to neighboring countries or remote mountain villages. Master and Madam were devastated, but they never gave up looking for you. 13 years later, that is, 2 months ago, someone found you in a brothel in the capital of Great Yu. After comparing you to Madam, they found a scar on your palm. It was exactly the same as the scar you got when you were naughty and careless when you were a child. Only then did they confirm your identity. This time, His Majesty sent an envoy to Great Yu. It just so happened that the deputy envoy and master were close friends. If the deputy envoy appeared, no matter how vicious the brothel's procuress was, she would still release you. Thus, the master ordered us servants to follow the deputy envoy and bring young Miss back to your homeland to reunite with your family. However, we servants didn't expect that the brothel's procuress would be so evil. She clearly accepted our ransom and promised to release you, but secretly plotted to kill you. Thus, in the chaos of the fight, young Miss accidentally fell down the stairs and hit her head. Thus, you forgot many things. The maidservant couldn't help but wipe her tears. Young Miss, you have really suffered these years. But rest assured, when you return to the manor and recover, you will definitely remember. However, this servant thinks that even if you can't remember, it doesn't matter. If you forget those bitter days, then forget them. In the future, we servants will definitely treat you well. Chapter 453. Hearing the servant girl's tearful narration, Ning Shu instinctively frowned and continued, "Then what is my name?" "Your maiden name is Lin Lang, White Jade Lin Lang, 4th in the family. You have 3 elder brothers and a Shu sister. They are all very friendly and kind people. Of course, you may not be used to this name. You haven't used it for more than a decade. You will slowly get used to it in the future. Right, look at this servant's brain, I forgot to say my name. The servant girl slapped her head and wiped away her tears. She said with a smile, this servant is Pangue, this is the name that Furin personally bestowed. I hope that Miss will return home soon. So it's like this. Ning Shu lowered her eyes. If it was as Pangue said, that she was unfortunate enough to end up in a brothel and suffer for more than a decade. One day, she would return home. Her family was rich, her brothers were honest, her sisters were kind, her parents were all deeply in love and only hoped for her return. She should be overjoyed. But why was her heart so calm and unruffled? She felt unfamiliar, as though the person she spoke of had nothing to do with her. In the dream, the sorrowful cries of "Shu" echoed in her mind. It was like a knife cutting at her heart, causing her limbs to feel numb and the pain to penetrate her heart. She moved and then realized that the right side of her face was bandaged. She instinctively wanted to tear it off but was stopped by Pangue. She said with a nervous expression, "Fourth Miss, what are you doing?" Her momentary panic caused Ning Shu to say blankly, "I just feel that the cloth is too thick and I can't breathe. So I want to tear it off a bit to get some air." "What is it?" Pangue's gaze dodged and then she said reproachfully, "You fell down the stairs, saw blood, and your face was injured. So I helped you bandage it. The doctor said that you must not tear it off in the next few days. Otherwise, if it leaves a scar in the future, you will cry." Ning Shu smiled. "All right, if you say so, then so be it." The carriage followed behind the long procession, rumbling forward at a constant speed. She looked out from the corner of the fluttering carriage curtain, looking at the bustling streets that seemed strange yet familiar. She looked at the people passing by with familiar accents, chatting and laughing with their friends, bargaining with the shopkeepers. She looked at the ridge on the corner of the city gate getting closer and closer. She thought for a moment and said, "Are we going out of the city?" Pangue nodded and said happily, "Yes, we can leave this place and return to our homeland of the southern Yen after a while." Ning Shu's gaze lingered on a tall horse in front of the convoy. Sitting on the horse was a young noble who was close to 20 years old. He was wearing a scarlet cloak and had a tall and straight figure with slender limbs. But for some reason, that person's mood didn't seem to be good. His entire body was filled with a lonely and evil aura, causing people to retreat. Looking at his blurry silhouette, a strange feeling floated through Ning Shu's heart. She said, "Who is that?" Pangue pulled the carriage curtain back and said with a panicked expression, "Oh. That is the 6th Prince of Great Yu. He is under the orders of the Emperor to escort the vice-envoy and the princess out of the city. I heard that this person has a strange temper and kills people like scything flax. We should keep a respectful distance." Ning Shu's gaze floated to her unconsciously clenched hands and then she calmly retracted it. She said with a smile, "It's just a glance. Why are you so nervous? If you act like this, I will think that I have some conflict with him in the past and you won't let me see him." Pangue realized that his reaction was too much and hurriedly covered it up. No. You didn't know each other before. This servant just heard that this prince's reputation isn't good. We are about to leave Great Yu. It's best if we don't cause trouble. This way, we can return home safely and smoothly. Young miss, don't think too much. Ning Shu blinked and became curious. It sounds like after you came to the capital, you have inquired a lot about this place. Otherwise, how would you know what kind of reputation their prince has? Why don't you tell me about it? Caution flashed through Pangue's eyes. "Fourth young miss, why are you asking this?" Ning Shu's pair of watery eyes were limpid and bright. She gently said, What I mean is, I have already left Southern Yen for more than 10 years and have been living in Great Use Capital all this time. I presume that the things I have heard are all strange things here, so I wanted to ask you to tell me about it. This way, I might be able to recall some familiar things and recover my memories.